You're listening to a Rock Candy podcast.
Coming to you from Magnified Studios, Magnified Pod presents Pods from the Penalty Box, a nostalgic sampling of skate punk albums from the 90s Christian alternative scene. Join us in the pit. I'm Andrew.
I'm John.
And this is our podcast. And some people might be very confused because that was Five Iron Frenzy. We did them last season. I'm talking about skate punk. They're a ska band, but we're not doing any of those today.
Mag Pod Studios. I could have done one of those or something. Anyway.
Exactly. I have an intro prepared already for our next segment, but everybody's gonna have to wait because today we have our first guest this season. I think.
Is that right?
I don't think we've had a guest on. I mean, I guess we've had Jason on.
It doesn't count.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason.
R.I.P. Jason.
Permanent team member.
That's true. It'd be like me saying that you're a guest on the pod.
Yeah.
When you're a producer on the pod, you're not really a guest on the pod.
Yeah.
But Jason will be a guest on the pod soon.
Yes, he will.
Oh man, or not? Maybe not anymore after this intro.
Yeah. Sorry.
But today we are joyfully welcoming Tyler Huckabee, editor of Relevant Magazine, podcaster, excellent Twitter follow.
Yes.
Comic book fan. We just had an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
And if you're not following Tyler on the socials or what he's doing over at Relevant, you need to rectify that right now. What a great dude. What a great conversation. We're not going to do anything else today. This is the episode, our conversation with Tyler. I don't think there's anything else we should do unless, John, you have anything you want to say about our conversation with Tyler before we get into it.
I will say Will from Common Creatives was a guest this season. Slightly different because that wasn't a full episode. Yeah. But he's kind of our permanent dude too. So not quite a full guest.
God, I'm an asshole.
Well, it's a little different because we've had like little guest segments versus full guest episodes this season.
Here's what I'll say. Let's correct this.
Okay.
I feel like full-on interview episops have been so few and far between.
It's true.
And let's be real, like after every episode, I almost black out. Like
true.
We're coming up on 100 episodes, John, and I'm like, I have a hard time remembering just the last few months.
Yeah. People will sometimes reference some take we had on some album from like 6 episodes ago. And I'm like, if you say so. Not ringing any bells to me.
I guess that sounds right. Was I an asshole? Probably.
Probably, yeah.
I don't remember. These past 15 months have just permanently made my brain into pudding.
100%.
And if I offended someone a couple weeks ago, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Yeah. What we do remember, because we just did it, is our great interview with Tyler.
Yes.
Super fun conversation, but meaning to have him on the pod for a while and talked about a lot of really cool things. So eager for you guys to hear it.
John, before we get into our conversation with Tyler, let's hear about another one of our fellow podcast friends on the Rock Candy Podcast Network. And then after that, we will talk to our dude.
Let's do it.
I'm Avery Smith, and I'm here to invite you to Blessed Are the Binary Breakers, a multi-faith podcast of transgender stories. Whatever your own relationship to gender and spirituality may be, you will find yourself enriched by the stories shared by my guests, who so far have ranged in religion from Christian and pagan to Jewish, Sikh, atheist, and beyond, and have hailed from the US, Chile, Poland, Australia, and more. bookstore. Tune in wherever you get your podcasts, or read along with episode transcripts by visiting blessedarethebinarybreakers.com. See you there.
John, today on the pod, we welcome Tyler Huckabee. He is senior editor for Relevant Magazine. He has written for Washington Post, among other places, and he is the co-host of an outstanding superhero podcast, Cape Town. You can stream it and download it where you get podcasts. Tyler, welcome to Magnified Pod.
That was one of the better bios. Thank you for not going over any of the super embarrassing stuff.
I mean, we might get there as the interview goes on.
Oh yeah, I guess so. But you really elided over there's worse stuff you could have brought up. But yeah, that was a good one. That makes me feel very cool. I feel very affirmed coming.
We could have we normally, any guests we have on, we ask them for their CV. And we just kind of go line by line, and if there's anything questionable, we're like,
if there's a gap in job history there at all, we ask about that.
Well, there was no scooped at Cold Stone Creamery for 2 years.
We send a form email back. We're like, thank you for your interest in Magnified Pod. I'm sorry, but we have chosen other candidates for this position.
No, it is really. I'm looking forward to this, especially after I could understand you not taking that super sincerely, since I had to bump. We had this plan for yesterday. We're recording this on a Friday, and I had to bump yesterday, and I felt very bad about that.
Oh man, see, look at
a lot of anxiety.
This is the thing. Nobody needed to know. Now you're no,
but I felt I got to be transparent.
You're kneecapping yourself, bro.
I know. I know. This is my whole thing. I just undercut myself every step. I'm trying to trip myself up.
No, it's good, because off mic we were saying, the anxiety you felt as an Enneagram 9 about this, which I am as well, and we will touch on the Enneagram and possibly the X-Man and the Enneagram, the MCU and the Enneagram as we go forward. Yeah. But anyway, Tyler, we are so psyched to finally have you on the show. I've followed your writing for a long time. You write about culture, about faith, about politics and justice issues. You obviously have deep roots in the Christian bookstore alternate universe, as we like to call it. But you also have a sense of humor about it. And, that combo is sort of our core demo. And I just thought that it was a perfect opportunity for our paths to kind of cross here and get into a lot of the stuff that we both care about. So to kind of kick things off, for folks who might not know, could you tell us just a bit about your journey from sort of where you started in terms of your upbringing, your relationship to faith, what shaped you to who you are now and the work you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So I am from rural Nebraska, from small town Nebraska. And I was very much a church kid when I was I remember my grandpa was the music pastor at the church I went to when I was a little kid out there. Okay. And I just loved it. I really did. I was because it was made for people. I was a young white boy in a little Nebraska church. It was very much designed to appeal to me, and it did. I really enjoyed that. And we moved to slightly less rural. We moved to Lincoln when I was 12, and Lincoln, Nebraska, the capital, was very similar to church, which is kind of where I felt safe. I associated that with a lot of safety. The world was very strange, and church made a lot of sense to me. I understood all of the rules. And it wasn't until I moved to Chicago for college that a lot of the doctrine that I had been raised with from the church, from youth group culture, started to kind of run up against the realities of the world. And a lot of the questions that to me seemed very solid just didn't really work in a place like Chicago. And I lived first Moody Bible, where I went to school, which is extremely conservative, more conservative even than the world that I came from. I just didn't really I was fine there. I enjoyed my college experience there, but Chicago was so big and fun, and there were so many people with so many experiences that just didn't jive with mine. And so I broke kind of the cardinal rule that I was raised in and adjusted my understanding of theology to accommodate my experience instead of the other way around, which felt very strange and kind of scary to me, but has ultimately been very rewarding over time. I lived in Chicago. I ended up after I graduated, I did homeless work for a couple of years after that. And then that also was an enormous adjustment in terms of my social understanding of the world and what I wanted to advocate for in justice. And it was around that time that I first connected with Relevant, started writing for them. And I freelanced for them for a long, long time. And then it was kind of a mishmash of things. But I think the sort of the core of the journey was me living in these small bubbles of Christianity, of Christian culture, largely white, largely heteronormative, and then experiencing a wider world that was outside of those small bubbles that just didn't gel. And I could not reconcile the two together until I started doing a little more reading, had more curiosity about those outside worlds. And that's the journey that you're kind of catching me on. Honestly, I'm still on that one, I would say.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, that seems to be, at least in my experience, a fairly common Moody student progression where like they come to Moody in part for its conservative theology, but while there, whether it's because you're kind of in downtown Chicago and it's like not possible to not meet people of, varying identities and backgrounds, like by the end of this more conservative Bible college experience, most of them are thinking beyond what they originally, and that's true for all kinds of schools, but I feel like at Moody, it's particularly an interesting journey.
Well, I think especially the big one obviously is like the gay kids that you meet at Moody,
right.
who if you come out at Moody, you're going home. That's just
right.
That's not permitted at all.
Yeah.
And the more I saw of that, and the more I started to really question that, like, this doesn't work. This can't be I can't do this forever. I can't just keep meeting new gay friends and then kicking them out back to their homes. Right. So that was a pretty fundamental part of when I was 18, 19 years old, part of my identity that fell apart.
Yeah.
I imagine you had to have that. You probably weren't the anomaly there, that you probably were having these conversations with at least a handful of other friends at Moody.
I think so. I think probably so. I think there would be probably quite a few people who'd be a little bit surprised or are surprised. I know for a fact there are some people who are surprised about where my own journey has taken me.
Interesting.
I have a lot of fondness for a lot of the friends that I made at Moody. I think what's been difficult, maybe you guys can kind of relate to this. I look back on my time at this very conservative Bible college, really pretty positively. I had a good time there. I made good friends. And what has been difficult for me is being like, well, of course you did. You were a straight white guy. You had it was designed to make you happy. Why wouldn't you have enjoyed your time there? And realizing that the women, the people of color, the queer students had very different experiences than I did has been a big part of my disconnect.
Yeah.
Because I could not, I realizing how different my experience was than theirs has been very fundamental to a lot of my own disassociation from it.
No, that tracks in some ways with, I'll speak for John and I, like our experience with North Park in the ways that, like, I look back on my time at North Park and I loved it. Like, all of my best friends now are from North Park and my time there. And I've watched over these past 15 years, the way the denomination has decided to wage war on the LGBTQ community and churches who want to even skirt the line of being just like welcoming, and just this war that the church is choosing to wage against this one single issue, when that has historically not been what the denomination has been. So like trying to like hold like these two things in tension, where it's like, how do I not like let that color my experience, or like recontextualize like my experience? Because it's like it was I enjoyed it because there was but again, to your point, like I was not ever a queer kid at a Christian school.
Right.
So and where I am now in terms of my my theology or my political leanings, or just my how I think of human beings, is different than when I was 22.
Yeah. And I think there was for me at least, a like pop culture was a big part of that switch for me, which was always the danger. That's what Focus on the Family. That's what Dobson was worried about, was that you let those kids watch too much of the media and their normalization of this stuff, and they're going to change. And I did. It's very true. As I started to realize, like the people who I really loved on the shows that I cared about, and I'm thinking of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That's right.
I'm thinking of definitely some of the X-Men, these characters who I really identified with, I didn't identify with. I just loved them. And I realized there was no
Willow
place for them. Thinking of Willow. I there was no place for them in the world that I lived in. And that didn't work for me. It just didn't.
Yeah.
And so I accommodated the mainstream culture, which I know is a huge problem.
Tyler, you had to be in the world and not of the world, my dude.
But once I like started to feel that, that was a gateway towards me reading some more like, queer theology that existed, but that I just had no idea. I would have never known existed. It was not presented. It wasn't in the Moody library. You couldn't go read this stuff. So it was I had always been led to believe that this stuff was very much, if you accepted this, you were completely off the farm. And it took these kind of proddings for me to realize there's actually a great deal of very intellectual, cerebral, very thoughtful academia out there about all of this that's on the bottom shelf for anybody who cares to explore it. It's just you're not going to get it in the SBC,
Right.
Yeah.
Did that sort of pop culture awareness shift coincide with going to college? Like, was that when you sort of knew more, or was it as you were just going through adolescence?
Buffy was huge.
Yeah.
For me, that was a big part of high school.
Okay.
And that was, my parents were great and not terribly strict about what I watched or listened to. I was homeschooled, so I know that comes with a lot of the stereotype is like extremely conservative in pop culture sense, but I was allowed to really watch and listen to a lot of things, and so that was big. And comic books, anybody who knows me knows that I love comics, and that was really huge too, because as very like straight and white and heteronormative as comics were, especially in the 90s when I was coming of age and all of it, that was kind of the worst time for it. But there still were enough kind of like token gay characters or women that really ran up against the narrative that I was being handed from stories like Wild at Heart or Driscoll, that made me question, that just felt more real than what I was getting, and kind of pulled me, that's sort of the drift, I'd say, the creep.
Sure.
Yeah. It's because they're a lot of the characters, they're not caricatures, they're not created, Willow was not this stereotypical lesbian character.
No, exactly.
She was any nerdy friend that you had in high school, and this wasn't like some sort of evil, promiscuous person trying to like, what's that guy's name who like thinks gay people are trying to recruit you and
oh man, where to begin?
I know where to begin, but
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, anyway, it's just like I think that's what you're talking about with Dobbs, and just like the second you start, they're worried about like these people being humanized, because once you start seeing them as just like a person rather than just some sort of like a threat or somebody to be scared of, then it's just like, oh, they're just a person. That's it.
Yeah. And I think there was this idea that any gay person who was in media, like Willow, was part of the gay agenda. That was the word I kept being, and it never occurred to these people that an exclusively straight cast is that part of a straight agenda to make sure like that was. Somebody pointed that out, I think that was like a early, like 15-year-old, like get like mind blown gift, like the straight agenda. I never even considered that. It really threw me for a loop, but I'm so glad for those experiences. And I'm so glad for the people who were very patient with a very young, dumb Tyler Huckabee, who was extremely close-minded and were able to coach me forward a little bit at a time, and have ultimately led me to a place that I have sort of a low grade grief about the world and the role that Christianity, that my own culture has played in it, but much more confident in my own theology and the inclusiveness that it's led me to.
Yeah. One thing that I've said a few times on the show as we've talked about our sort of experience in college was like, so I majored in biblical and theological studies because I wanted to get some black and white answers. I was like, let's get some firm footing. I'm tired of kind of like, nuance. Not that I was like bigoted in my approach to that, but just feeling like I needed to actually like really dive into the word and like, have this firm footing. But the more that I actually study, of course, the grayer it gets and the more nuanced it becomes. Yeah, totally. And just learning to, my theology and my understanding of God grew so much bigger when I learned to embrace the mystery and not have that be a negative, but have it be something that reflects positively about my faith understanding. So anyway, I resonate with that.
Has embracing the mystery, I love that phrase, but I find it practically very hard to know what that means for me. Like, I really enjoy the idea of it. And it feels like kind of like when I was in college, Blue Like Jazz from Don Miller was a very big deal. And I would imagine North Park it was as well. And that was the time where we're embracing doubt and being okay with uncertainty became a big thing. But I feel like I'm still kind of struggling with what that even means, to know how to rest in that. And I don't know if you guys have any, I've gotten better at that than I have. Almost anybody could, because I feel like I'm pretty bad at it.
Yeah, I think it was the theologian Nightcrawler who said it best when he said, what kind of God would let man, or no, that was Wolverine. What kind of God would let man do this to me? And he said, our ability to understand God's purpose is limited, but we take comfort in the fact that God's love is limitless. We'll get into that
Father Wagner.
That's right. Yes. One of the lesser known saints.
You know the way to my heart.
But I do think that there is something to that, just in the sense of, look, you might not ever get, there's never not going to be books of the Bible that don't contradict each other. And there's never going to be one clear answer on what this sort of theological tenet is. But there is the clearness of, the like gospel mandate to love one another, and that God's love is limitless. And I have enough to sort of rest on that idea and let that be enough. I guess that's sort of what I'm thinking when I say the mystery is sort of like, I can't sort of do an exegesis on every piece of scripture that I get a hang up on, but I'm like, well, I know that God is love, and that's sort of enough. And I don't need to, come up with a perfectly worded articulation of that. And I thought I needed to when I was younger, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you have other stuff to say about that, feel free. But I was just like, that was kind of my own evolution theologically?
I don't think I do. It's something that I have grown. So I think that we already discussed how I'm an Enneagram 9.
Yes.
Nines are very, I think it's very difficult for me, at least I'll speak personally, to know what that, to have any sort of like moral certainty or clarity around certain situations. And so I've always found myself very attracted to people who do have a lot of moral certainty, people who know what the right and wrong thing to do is in any given situation, because I never feel like that. And I associated that when I was young with being a good Christian. Good Christians know what the morally right, they have a very black and white mentality. And as I've grown in my own spiritual journey, I've felt less and less clear about that, but I have retained that very that intrigue from anybody who knows how to do that. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out these days, the balance of embracing the mystery of spirituality, knowing that we will never know everything, but also having a strong sense of justice and being very clear on when those lines are being crossed in our society and certainly in my own personal life as well. And I think it's difficult. As you go through what they call now that deconstruction process to continue to, call that shit out.
Yeah. Was it, I mean, do you have an 8-wing or a 1-wing?
I do have an 8-wing.
Okay. That's interesting. 'Cause I have a 1-wing and I feel like it's a pretty strong one. So like, I feel that sort of, back to the comic characters, Captain America as a 1, he's got the right and wrong. He's got it figured out, the moral line. And I feel like that colors my sort of 9 perception of the world sometimes, where it's like when there's the sort of right and wrong, that must be sort of called out. But, that's complex as well. And we have other Cap questions we'll get into along those lines later.
I'm ready.
I'm an Enneagram 4, so I just stare into the darkness and the void.
Scarlet Witch style.
I don't necessarily
with the hand move, with the fingers like moving around little like designs. Yeah,
I don't necessarily have any of the answers, but I just feel super emo about it.
I mean, totally fair position. But speaking of pop culture, perhaps before Buffy, as a kid, I know you were heavily into the CCM world. Can you talk a little bit about what your relationship was to CCM growing up? I mean, I know you wrote a fan letter to Carmen, I believe.
You did do some research.
That's probably worth unpacking.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so CCM. So I grew up in this little town, and my mom's parents, my grandma and grandpa, also lived there, and they had this little Christian bookstore. It was called Treasures of the Heart.
This is perfect.
And it is no longer there. R.I.P. to Treasures of the Heart. But Treasures of the Heart was, they had all the books and the paintings, the painter of lights. There was
Thomas Kincaid.
You can see it in your mind. It was small. And then they had the wall of CDs, the top 40 Christian.
Yeah.
And in Maya, we're talking DC Talk, we're talking Caedmon's Call. I was a little too late for the Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith time, but my parents were very much into that, so that they were part of my home growing up. And it was that was my musical. Other kids had, whatever they were, Ace of Base, and I was listening to Caedmon's, and it was not in my mind I was not the kid who was like, I just got to get out of this town. I'm made for more. That was not my world. I was very happy being a little CCM dork. And in fact, didn't even know that I didn't really care for the world beyond it for most of my life, but I would work at my grandparents' store and they would pay me in CDs. And so I was extremely into DC Talk. was extremely into I love jars of clay. Actually, I'm just coming to this podcast from hanging out with one of the jars of clay guys.
Right.
I've
nice.
gotten to meet a lot of my childhood heroes kind of on their own ends of the deconstruction situation.
Right.
But
He's written for Relevant a few times, right?
I mean, a lot of these
Different
guys
guy.
have a lot of them have appeared in Relevant at this point. The Switchfoot guys who I also really loved, obviously, and then later on Reliant K, MXPX, who are more in your, and then Five Iron was enormous for me and so many Christian kids because it was the first like little bit of resistance to the popular narrative you were getting. Really, that was what Five Iron represented for me. That just blew my mind wide open. So you had contemporary Christian music, which is what I was raised in, and then you kind of had I guess it was CCM. There were never really subcategories, but once I started getting into a little more of the tooth and nail scene, even some of the Forefront guys, that was a pretty big game changer.
Yeah, that was,
and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, totally. One thing that Andrew and I talk about a lot on the show is like, so our first season of the pod was dedicated to MXPX. Second was Five Iron, and for both of us, it was like these were bands that gave permission to sort of question society, the church, like all these different sort of isms. And I think once that door is opened, like you can kind of keep going along that path. But I think the reason Five Iron was so huge for us and for so many people was like they were part of the world, but they were not going with the company line, and we're willing to sort of encourage you to look at yourself and look at the communities you're part of and ask questions.
Questions
Go ahead.
No, just that first Five Iron record, talking about Native American genocide, Manifest Destiny, and then questioning patriotism and questioning questioning the Christian scene, like the punk scene, and like just like some of the stuff, like you said, it was just sort of mind blowing, and that sort of, as John said, that permission to be like, it felt like, is this okay? Can you do this? And I think that's what a lot of conservative Christian thinkers were afraid of, that like encouraging to sort of like broaden your worldview of like to incorporate other experiences and identities and narratives. And some of these narratives were not part of the standard CCM company line, as John said.
Yeah, and I think there's a real I think the fear for a lot of the like youth pastors was that they start questioning one, they'll start questioning everything. Like you pull one card out of the house and the whole thing comes tumbling down. Right. I think that's a valid fear. I think that the evangelical world is built on a pretty fragile foundation, and the reason you can't start questioning it, you start pulling at any thread on it, and pretty soon the sweater is all the way unraveled. And that's why bands like Five Iron were genuinely so dangerous, in a good way. They led to an enormous amount of awakening in me. It was a confluence of things, but hearing those calls come from inside the house it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
I mean that's a relatively scathing indictment of the church if a third wave ska punk band could just like bring down the entire infrastructure of the evangelical church. If you're just like, where do you begin? You start with Five Iron and then like everything's unraveling.
Yeah. Which is the whole, like, it was even like taught to us as an argument, like, well, why question the Bible? Because when we start questioning the Bible, everything else falls apart. Like, well, that's worse, right? Like, you see how that's worse? That's not a good.
It's not a good argument. And it's like, like it to me. It's like, you start questioning everything. It's like, okay, why don't you want me? Why don't you want me to question things?
Yeah.
What are you not telling me What answers are you afraid I'm going to find?
The what are you not telling me thing. And you tell a 14-year-old, what do you mean we don't ask about that? It just feels like telling somebody not to touch a hot plate. It's a very alluring, and it stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah. It's interesting that, your wording around it was like the evangelical structure is what will fall, not somebody's relationship to God or relationship to Jesus. Like, I don't doubt that those people are coming from a place of believing the way to God is through that structure, but it is, as you're saying, Andrew, pretty damning that it's like, well, are we protecting what we've built here for ourselves, or are we protecting your relationship with God? And those are perhaps distinct things.
And for different people, it's gone different ways. I know, like, my experience was my own, and honestly, I feel very comforted by my relationship with God these days, and very like it's a core part of who I am as a person. I love being a Christian. I really do. People doubt that when I say that, and I know Christianity doesn't have the best brand in America right now, but I really love being a Christian, and I don't know why it went different for me than it does for some people who just lose. I don't know, but I understand the people who decided they just couldn't do Christianity, they were just over Christianity. I completely get that, and I don't judge those people at all. My journey just ended up being different, and I've just found a version of it that I feel like is a little truer and purer, and has been much more rewarding for my own life, for my family's life, for me and my wife's life.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. Well, before you maybe reached that point on your journey, though, what were some of your favorite bookstore cultural items or pieces of ephemera? I mean, I know you're an Adventures in Odyssey head.
When I was a kid, Adventures in Odyssey was a big deal. Mr. Whitaker was a very big deal. Sure. I remember this was my thing, and I don't know if this is anybody else's thing. This could have been I don't know if this is a universal experience, but the back of the little Christian bookstore that I went to had like two little like boombox situations with the headsets, like just the headphone, just a cheap like probably $9.99 from Best Buy headphones plugged into the aux, and they had all the sample, like probably 100 sample CDs that were there ready to go, and you could just go back and listen to them. And I spent that was my pre-Spotify. I just loved going through those. That's where I found Plum was a big deal for me. Really loved Tiffany Arbuckle and Plum. A lot of Sixpence, the Sixpence was kind of weird. Like, the lyrics were very poetic and way more intellectual than a lot of stuff I was listening to, which was really interesting. POD, Pack 217, definitely Stave Saker, and then kind of a little bit later on Blindside became enormous. About a Burning Fire was so important to me. And that was, at that point, I was getting like later on in high school and was listening to a little more, like, I was dating girls who were listening to cooler music, so I felt like I needed to catch up a little bit just to be a dateable boy on the scene. Right. But I was still listening to a lot of Christian hardcore and that stuff at the time.
Yeah, I didn't want to, like, in the year 2000, like, roll up to some girl and like pick her up on a date or something and be like listening to Free at Last by DC Talk in your car or something.
It's a jam.
It's a jam.
No,
it's a jam.
It is a jam.
In fact,
but it kind of immediately says, we're not even gonna hold hands tonight. That's
yeah, it's like,
it literally says, I don't want
your sex for now.
This is a perfect segue because a member of DC Talk gave you some advice along these lines yesterday on Twitter.
That's
you should tell people.
Yeah. The king. I got to give a shout out to Kevin Max, who is a member of DC Talk, far and away the coolest member of DC Talk. Has always been
100%.
Nothing but love for Toby Mac. Michael got, you you had it. You had your time and your place.
Friend of the pod.
But Kevin Max is kind of an internet friend. And so I went on the lamest kind of a date with my wife last night. I'm a wife guy, 100%, big time wife guy. We had a great time. It was so much fun. We went out for the first time, like post COVID. We had like a real date to a restaurant we had not been to before. It was so much fun. And I just shot out a tweet that we were doing this thing. We were going on a date and asked for any advice. And what did Kevin say? Kevin Max responded to the tweet and said, I don't want it out of one speaker or something like that.
Yeah, that was it.
That's the best. What a good album. What a good dude.
What a good dude. What a great jam.
Did
Truly
you,
the best song about not wanting to have sex. The greatest incel anthem of all time.
Oh man, we've covered some of those this season. That one's the king.
Did she impress this brother with a life of virtue?
I was,
Did she back up off with less of that zest?
The ring is on, so that part of the dance is over.
Yeah.
But
safe is the way they say to play. Then again, safe ain't safe at all today.
But my wife, Liz Riggs, is a 100% very she's virtuous in every way.
Okay. Oh man, I don't even remember what we were talking about.
we were talking about DC Talk, CCM tokens. All of that stuff was like very, I really, and when I go back to it now, which occasionally I'll just, what was I thinking at that time? I'm really not embarrassed by it anymore. I was for a while, but it's part of my story now. And some of it I even can really admire. And like I said, some of you guys become friends, and via my work at Relevant, I obviously professionally interact with some of them quite a lot now, and have had some pretty negative experiences, but for the most part, they've been pretty positive. I think a lot of them have kind of grown up as well and have their own spiritual journeys that feel very, they've kind of mirrored my own in a lot of ways. And we have a mutual understanding about that was a time in our lives. They were creating it, I was consuming it, and now it's 2021, man.
Yeah.
We're different.
Almost without fail, when we've talked to an artist or a member of one of these bands we've discussed today, they've been like, yeah, those were some bummer lyrics we wrote. Like, everyone has an evolution, and most of us have landed in a similar place. We were all part of this world, and we're all trying to make sense of it.
And they had the unfortunate job of creating that, which I'm not jealous of. That sucks. But I'm not. But they got paid.
Yeah,
I don't resent them for that. It's easy for me to not resent them because I was not one of the people who was disenfranchised by the work they were doing.
Right.
But I really don't blame anybody who had to who was just trying to make a living and keep their career going, because you have to do that in this country, and it's hard. So it's where you ended up.
We've had this conversation. We talked about it a little bit when we covered Ace Troubleshooter a couple, like a month or so, 2 months ago. And John Warren, who's just like the coolest dude, and I was talking about how he talks about like some of the lyrics he just looks back on, and he's just like, man. And I'm like, and so like we try and like hold that balance of like critiquing what's being said while recognizing that's like, I held these same beliefs and positions when I was 15 years old, and I just was fortunate enough to not have a record deal to tell everybody about my bad idea, my bad thoughts, and my bad, philosophies about culture and women and all that. So if I had a record deal, I would have put out so many terrible takes for all the world to be able to listen to forever, and that sucks. And you're right. It's like, it's hard to, and when you think about like a lot of these young white men growing up in these youth group cultures, these church cultures, they didn't come to these ideas on their own. Like they're taught these ideas, And so they're like 16-year-old kids writing these songs that get put onto albums, and the certainty that with which they like profess these things. I mean, that is what is they're told that's what they're supposed to think. And so they regurgitate that. And then as they go on, they're just like, oh, that's maybe not the best take in the world. And so like we try and hold that balance on the pod of being like, hey, this song was written 25 years ago, and this person was a legit child when they wrote this song. So it's tough. It's a tough look, but it is heartening when you talk to people, like a Reese Roper or a John Warren, and you're just like, okay, you can like watch their evolution in a lot of ways. And just watching Reese's evolution over the years is just like, just outstanding to see like some of the stuff that he was writing back in 1996. In 2021, he's even more fiery.
He's continued to grow. That was not the end of his journey. It was, that's not a lot of people don't continue. And it's been inspiring for me, to see some of those people who have continued to hold new opinions and change. And I think disagreeing with something that was it's why I say this with a lot of reservations, because I know how much this person's work hurt people, and so I want to be cautious in how I want to preemptively kind of say that and be cautious about how I approach this. But I've tried to hold a little bit of grace in my own heart for Josh Harris as he was reckoned with the I Kissed Dating Goodbye thing, which caused an enormous amount of damage, particularly for women. And he, I think, has tried to acknowledge that, and will probably spend the rest of his life in a sort of a position of apology for what he did there. But kind of like you said, he was a kid when he wrote this book, and the people who enabled him to write this,
that to me,
who gave him permission, those people absolutely should be held accountable for what they did, for reading this and being like, give this to put this in the hands of teenagers of today, for sure. That was a terrible idea. And I'm glad he's apologizing. I think he should apologize. I don't think there's but I understand that he came from an environment where this sort of thing was encouraged, applauded, allowed, and he did not have the wherewithal as a schooler to say, maybe I'm not the person who should be accepting the mantle of the Christian romance genius of my generation.
Under no circumstances should he have been given that level of authority.
It's absurd.
It's a joke. He was a child who was married for like all of like a year before that first book came out.
He was not married when that first book came out.
He wasn't married
yet? He was a single man when I Kissed Dating Goodbye came out. Then he got married, and
Boy Meets Girl.
Yeah, I think so, whatever that was called. Yeah.
And now I don't say this with any sort of like joy or glee, because I too am divorced. Like, but now I think he's divorced.
True.
And I just feel like I know plenty of people who got married young and things are great. But I think that within the church, this idea of that we emphasize sort of the marriage relationship versus understanding our individual selves, and like trying to be like, okay, well, what is it that I want? And because the church doesn't encourage singleness, because if you're single for too long, especially with women, there's something wrong with you. And like your greatest purpose should be to be partnered and to have children. And and so like this idea of like trying to understand yourself, that is not necessarily encouraged within evangelical circles. And I feel like, you know, for Josh, having that level of power, like I mean, at that young age, oh my God, I can't imagine what that does to you, and the pressure to like have an answer. And like, I gotta imagine that there's had to have been stress that was put on that relationship, and the transition of that stress probably went to his relationship. And I just can't imagine, like, and as the years went on, the stress of like, was this a good thing that I did? And was this the right call? And have I evolved beyond this relationship? You know, there's just so much there. And yes, I too have a significant amount of compassion for him as an individual, while recognizing that the perpetuation of purity culture that he was a part of absolutely devastated so many people.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it is attention.
It's attention. And he was, like many of us were, and like I have been in points in my own life, a vessel for the things that he was handed, and was given a platform that was very beguiling, obviously, for him as a young person, or anybody, when offered the ability to make money and have influences, is probably going to take it. But as I've seen sort of the journey he's been on since, I've been understanding, and but I say this with a lot of compassion for the people who've been very, very hurt and had their own relationships and their own lives really hamstrung by Ika stating goodbye and the impurity culture at large, because I know that's been devastating. It's been difficult in my own life, and difficult in my wife's life, and obviously very difficult for many women and men in America. I don't know what we're going to do about it.
No, just see any previous episode of Magnified Pod, where I will am most likely talking about being weighed down by any amount of sexual shame that I have carried through much of my life. And I wasn't even the target market for that kind of shit, you know. Like but there was I'm sure, as somebody who had like was in the bookstore scene. Do you remember the Every Man's Battle book series?
Oh yeah.
Oh, like I remember sitting in the bookstore and just like reading that, like trying to secretly read that, because of just how the unbearable weight of guilt that I was dealing with, you know, just lust and sexual shame. And it's just like, it just beat me down, no pun intended, you know, but you know, it's just still, it was just like, I carried that into my late 30s. I'm still like, I'm no longer affiliated with the church, and haven't been for, you know, almost 8 years now. And it's still the wounds are deep, and you carry them for a long time.
Yeah. And I don't think that those are wounds. As I've been listening to great singer-songwriter Lucy Dacus, who's like 1/3 of Boy Genius with Phoebe Bridgers,
right,
and Julian Baker. She put out a song a couple of days ago. It's called VBS. Did you guys see?
Yes,
did you guys see that?
See this? Yeah.
No, there's been kind of a recent rush of, I feel like, singer-songwriters, particularly women, who have been deep chronicling their experiences growing up in church. Not super positively, I wouldn't say so far. You don't see a lot of like, I went to youth group as a kid and it made me the woman I am today. It's not that thing. But
Similar
Lucy Dacus's song VBS, which is really good, is about that church camp. It's about that church camp romance, the like meeting somebody and dating somebody who you meet at a summer youth group camp situation. And her reflection on that is how much the spiritual part of that kneecaps you. It makes you, and you don't know at that age how to separate your hormones from God. So it all kind of swirls together, and this very confusing. And you're so horny that you just want to die. And but you make that part of also like, maybe this is like the love of God that's influencing me. It's awful. It's really, really terrible. And that song brought me back to that point and helped remind me of just how much, I know it's church culture at large, but I think it really is something particular to youth group culture in particular that can really hobble teenagers on their development, especially their like relational sexual development, because you have a bunch of youth pastors who themselves are in their young 20s, are in no way equipped to be teaching teenagers about how to deal with, as we've seen many times. It is created, it's done a lot of harm. It's done a lot of harm for people, and I think we need to get rid of that.
Have you read Pete Holmes's comedy Sex God?
Yes. Yeah.
He talks about that very early on in the book, just like, these volunteers are teaching the answers and the mysteries of the universe to impressionable young kids. And, down the street, they're like parents are protesting something at one of the public schools. And it's like, do you not see like the disparity between these two things? Like, and like these kids are being taught like all these checklists about like how far is too far within like your relationships. And it's like, you're just giving all these kids complexes about like their bodies being wrong. And it's tough. And so like, you think about like, I was going back to Joshua Harris for a second, like there had to have been moments where he was either making shit up on the spot because he didn't know, like he had to have an answer. Like how often, like if you're an authority, how often is it okay to be like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't have an answer. There's probably this pressure to be having a, like, kind of looping in Marvel. Like I remember seeing Ta-Nehisi Coates speak, and people were asking him questions about like, so what do we do about this thing in education? What do we do about this thing in politics? And he's like, I'm a journalist. I don't know. You ask somebody who works in education, ask somebody like, and I love that model of being able to say, I'm a writer. You need to like go to somebody else. And like, just that level of humility that like doesn't exist in a framework where certainty is what they're selling.
Yeah. Coates is great at that. And it was the first time I've seen that modeled in somebody who I consider to be an extraordinarily intelligent, thoughtful person.
Yes.
And it has really changed, in addition to the many ways that he has changed my life, because I'm indebted to Coates in many ways. Seeing him say so many times, that's a great question, I don't know the answer. I would have loved to see that modeled growing up more, because I think it really would have changed my life in important ways. And I hope to model that for other people too,
Mm-hmm.
That kind of reminds me of like one of the things that he kept getting asked on press tours, especially for Between the World and Me, was like, so where do you find hope in this? And he's like, I'm not a pastor, like a pastor or like somebody who specializes in hope might answer that. He's like, I wrote a book about the situation of the world, and I'm not here to give you hope. So I think that's kind of a profound like shifting of how we look at this stuff too.
Because he could have made it up,
Totally.
Nobody would have called him out on that.
No.
Nobody would have said, bullshit, you don't have hope about this. He absolutely could have, but his commitment to authenticity was to me meant a lot. And
it would have been shared a million times by woke white people on Facebook. And like, look at this hope. And it's just no, he's like, in a way, he's been like, I'm not going to give the white people the hope. Like there's still work needs to be done. Like there's a lot of shit that needs to be done. I'm not going to give you that hope because it's like it'll make you feel better. It's like I love that. I love him for that.
What do you think about the announcement that he's going to write the new Superman movie?
I can't wait.
It's going to be rad.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sure. Yeah, there's so much toxicity, particularly around DC stuff, so that'll be a whole minefield. But I'm excited for what that.
If anybody can handle it, if anybody can get me excited about it, it's Ta-Nehisi Coates on a Superman movie.
Agreed. So kind of along the lines of, we're talking about 90s artists, 90s culture, where they felt the need to sort of give certain answers or clear lyrics because they had been told these answers. You did a story on the top 10 CCM songs of the 90s that still slap. And I think we need to unpack a few of those for our purposes here. So one of them is Five Iron's Dandelions. And you already talked a bit about your relationship to Five Iron, but could you explain a little more about why you felt like that song was one of the 10 to include?
Sure. I could have picked a number of Five Iron songs.
Sure.
Every New Day feels a little obvious, but I do love that song. Dandelion felt to me, I think that one landed because it came for me during the age of like John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, that whole thing, where men, I think most people who listen to this probably know what I'm talking about, but like Christian men were supposed to be Christian men, and we show love to God by camping, and and I loved that, and I do enjoy camping.
Sure.
But hearing somebody sing a song about giving God flowers, and I think this is important, relating God to a woman in that song, like God is the mother, very much the mother in that song, to me was very strange and was very revolutionary. And I think the melody holds up, I think is great, but the humility portrayed in that has remained pretty important to me over time. Because I think that's one of the first things to go in a lot of deconstruction processes for people, is that concept of being, of understanding your own sin and identifying as a person who is a sinner. And that stays something that is pretty core to who I am in the middle of my own deconstruction journey. And that is core to the Dandelion song as well. So that's why I picked that one.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that's another thing that we talk about a lot for why not only we responded to them as kids, but why we still love their stuff, why it's one of the bands that really holds up, is because he so often pointed the finger at himself rather than at others. And how that positioning a song, whether you intend to like sort of, explicitly talk about the gospel in a song or not, positioning it around questioning yourself rather than having it be judgmental is so much better of a way to respond to this message you're trying to talk about.
Yeah.
Those are the songs that rarely hold up when you go back and listen to them as an adult, where you just be like, you listen to some of those early MXPX, and this is a line that we reference all the time. It's like, it's in God's book, but he don't want to look. It's like when you're like a high school kid and you're like, I have all the answers. Like, all right, guy, calm down. Like, just maybe a little bit more self-reflection rather than just like I've got it figured out. Why won't you just listen to me? Why won't you listen to me? I'm trying to evangelize. Like, well,
which is what he was hearing from the youth pastor, right? Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
He was just parroting the party line.
Exactly.
So it's not. It doesn't absolve. That's not an absolution. Because that's just what George W. was doing with the WMDs. But it is a. I understand it. It's the exact same lyrics I would have been writing if Tooth and Nail had come to me and given me a record contract. Which, thank God Almighty, they didn't.
Oh man,
I
would like to hear. Yeah, I was gonna say we've heard plenty of teenage us. I want to hear teenage Tyler's.
Nope. No.
Another one of those top 10 is Estevan by Goaty Hook, which is the next band that we're covering this season. So can you talk about your relationship to them or to that album or song?
Nope, I can't. I'm afraid, because this album, this list was co-written with my colleague Jesse Carey, who is great and would be very good on this podcast, and I hope you get him. But but he was the one who picked that, and I actually have almost no relationship with Goaty Hook.
Goaty Hook. Okay, yep. You had said like skate punk wasn't really your vibe, but I'm like, but you got Goaty Hook on here, man.
No, it's true. I really Penalty Box and all of that was very much not my. I'm more of a skater now than I was then. I actually skate quite a bit these days, but it was not part of my high school vibe.
Sure. What about Waterdeep? Was that yours or his?
I think that was his, but I do know. But Waterdeep I did listen to. I have at least a little bit of a relationship there. Interesting cats.
Yeah, I was really into them in college. That kind of like folky stoner vibe, but from the Christian scene was one I appreciated at the time. But did you ever go to, we ask every guest who's like got any Illinois connection to this, but did you ever go to Heart and Soul Cafe in the Chicago suburbs?
I know Heart and Soul Cafe, but I have not ever been there. No.
Okay.
But I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I saw Waterdeep perform there multiple times. So anyway, just
checks out in every way. It makes a lot of sense. I feel like Waterdeep was kind of, we got from them what maybe other people got from like, I don't know, Violent Femmes or something like that. It was a very like, if I was getting high in college, which I was not, then it would have been then Waterdeep would have been the like, man, God just loves everybody. It felt right.
I remember one of my friends like genuinely asking me as we were listening to Waterdeep, like, do you think they do smoke weed? And I was like, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. And they were kind of like, wow, I don't know. Hard to say what's going on there. But Plum, another song to discuss, right?
So you had Stranded by Plum. I'm assuming that was yours since you talked about. So I saw Plum and Jars of Clay play together. It probably had to have been after this their first two albums. Their first albums came out. But like I didn't really listen to a lot of Plum back then, but is it just me, or is there did Michelle Branch rip off Stranded? I feel like Michelle Branch's song Everywhere is 100% a like carbon copy of that Stranded song by Plum.
Well, you're giving a little bit of a. I'm kind of like, hang on, whoa, like you're throwing me for a loop here. But which one came first?
Stranded by Plum by 2 years.
Well, sounds like we need to get some lawyers on the phone.
I'm saying, let's they need to lawyer up, go after all that Michelle Branch money.
I've also I love Plum, and I do love that song. I love Strand. I've got love for Michelle Branch, by the way, too. So no, I'm not trying to throw any shade at Michelle here. I think that something that I really, through Relevant, I've interviewed a lot of like young singer-songwriters, and I've interviewed a lot of young women singer-songwriters in CCM who have talked about how important Tiffany Arbuckle was to them as a mentor.
Interesting.
And how much she encouraged them and supported them and helped them fight for their own like worth and value and money to get like, and that has really improved my assessment of them after the fact. When you hear about somebody good in that industry, it obviously goes a long ways. And I've heard her many people have talked about how valuable she was to especially young women coming up in that industry. So I've got a lot of love for Plum. And I think that I think Candy Coated Water Drops. I think that was a really good slept on album. That was really it was held back by a lot of there was a lot of stuff going on. I think with the label at the time that was difficult for them. It didn't get quite the marketing push that it deserved.
Who were they on?
It was what?
What label were they on?
They were. It was not Essential.
I mean, it's not like
I don't know if I can't remember off the dome. I can't remember.
That's right.
I don't know the drama. I don't know the full. I don't have a VH1 behind the music thing ready to go, but I'm aware that there were some struggles with that between them and the label at the time.
It was Essential.
Was it Essential? Okay,
yeah.
Never mind then. Doesn't have the best reputation for giving up and coming CCM artists a really great deal at that time.
You're saying shady things were happening on Christian record labels in the 90s?
I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
Somebody who was never signed.
Sure, fair enough. All right, let's talk comics. Is that good with everybody?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
You've written a few pieces that I feel like we need to explore here.
Okay.
We've talked extensively about both the Avengers and the Enneagram on this podcast, and you wrote out the Enneagram types of not only Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but the rest of the Avengers.
You're going to hold me to this? All right.
Well, I just feel like we need to unpack it a little bit.
I'm ready.
Was this an existing article and you updated it for Falcon and Winter Soldier?
I did, but I've written it all.
Okay.
Because I updated my own piece.
Okay. Because I was like, as a 9 pre-WandaVision, seeing Vision as the 9, I was kind of like, am I a robot? Like, it made sense the more time I spent with Vision, especially in that show. And he's somebody that I knew somewhat from the comics, but like, I was never like a huge Vision fan. I know people are like really into him, and I understand it more post that show and reading some of those books that it's based on.
I called Vision as a 9 from the jump.
Yeah,
that was part of the original.
Right.
Article.
So
I got Vision tattooed on the back of my arm.
Ooh,
let's see that.
Cool. Oh man, that looks sick.
Oh,
yes,
dude.
that's dope.
Yeah.
Visual. It's a tattoo. For the listeners, yeah.
Maybe we
Very
can post
cool.
a pic or something.
Extremely cool tattoo.
Yes. But yeah, for a long time I was like, oh, the Avengers and the Enneagram, this is perfect. And I was like, 9 Vision, how do I feel about it? But the more that I've sat with it, the more that I think you're right. But could you explain a bit? And now I was just going to say, now it's a little different because Falcon is in there as a 9 as well, which is like perhaps a more exciting choice for us 9s. But talk about, what's your relationship to Vision and then why you think Falcon is a 9 to you?
I would say Vision. So Vision was never like my favorite character. I don't think he's many people's favorite character, but he always seemed like a very core part of the Avengers to me in the comics. I kind of grew up reading my dad's old comics, like the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. So this would be the like Bronze Age comics. Yeah. And he was always in there. So I considered him a core part of the Avengers, even if he wasn't my own favorite. And his the sort of like referee role that he tends to play, and a lot of like very aloof in the comics, very aloof, very kind of a mediator role in a lot of times. And that, I think that's kind of, as is often the case in these sort of fanfic Enneagram situations, you don't end up with the one you want. You're like, well, I would love to be a Captain America or an Iron Man or something like that. But that's just not how the dice rolled. And I do think when I watch Vision, particularly in the show in WandaVision, he reacted to conflict absolutely in a way that I feel like I react to conflict in my marriage with other people. So that I had, even before WandaVision, I had kind of listed him as a 9, but WandaVision felt like it was almost written by somebody who really understood 9s and affirmed the hunch that I had, I'd say, when I wrote that article.
Totally. I think the show very much just fleshed out the like paragraph that you'd written about why he would work for that type. I was like, this makes total sense now. But as a bigger fan of Sam Wilson, I was psyched to see him listed as a 9 in your piece too. So, I mean, similar traits there in terms of sort of negotiating between different parties. But talk a little bit about why you think he falls there.
because in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when the government comes to him and says, "We don't think you should have the shield," he says, "Okay."
Totally.
Which is absolutely what I would do.
You want this? I guess that, I haven't really thought about what I want, but here you go.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure these guys probably know more than I do about
yeah.
They would only ask if it was important. So
right.
that was sort of the key for me. And
Sure.
And I think that it was interesting. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I really enjoyed WandaVision. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'm a little more mixed on as a series. My like critical review is I think it did some things really well. I think it did some it failed in some pretty important stories that it was trying to tell. One thing I really loved about it was Isaiah Bradley, the older, the veteran who spent a lot of time in jail as the first super soldier trial, who freed a lot of his. Like, I thought that was from Carl Lumbly, some excellent acting, such a good performance in a short amount of time on that show. So good almost that it kind of made Sam Wilson's kind of like, well, he's living his truth, but I'm going to be Captain America anyway. It felt a little bit slight because that moment hit so hard that the rest of it didn't hit hard enough.
Yeah. You have a museum exhibition now, so I guess everything's cool, right?
Yeah. So see, it is like, does this museum exhibition have a check involved or are there any, like, do I get rent along with this?
Yeah.
But the way that Sam, it seemed like, continued to pivot to kind of agreeing with whoever he was in conversation with at the time, and then it would take him time to figure out his own position. That to me resonated very deeply because I need to sleep on tough things before I figure out where I'm at, and that's where it seemed like Sam was at too.
And as a healthy 9, spoiler alert, by the ending of the series, he's ready to embrace that shield.
He takes the shield. Yeah. Which I thought his trajectory was pretty good.
Yes, that was definitely one of my favorite aspects of the series.
I wish there were maybe minimum 2 more episodes that they could have fleshed out some stuff. I do feel like 6 episodes for all that they were trying to do was a little much. Some stuff felt a little like okay, you guys can just fill in the gaps, right? Like what they were trying to do with Flag Smashers was just unclear, and at least within the plot of the show with like Sharon Carter, it's just like she didn't get like her own episode necessarily about like why she like what's going on with her, and I keep waiting for, and I don't know if this is going to be fleshed out. I want I want that Blip series. I want to see more, maybe not even a series, but like show us more. Like if they had like shown like what the chaos looked like and why all the Flag Smasher people felt so disenfranchised, that would have been so much more impactful than being like, we're so mad. It's like, okay, show us.
Teens.
Like I would have loved to have been like the absolute. I mean, they did a little bit of that in WandaVision, but like I just would have loved to make that. I feel like that would have made it a little bit more powerful because they're like, are we supposed to be on her side? Whose side are we on? Are we on John Walker's side? Because
WandaVision did a better job of it laying it out than Falcon Winter Soldier did, which was ostensibly about the fallout of the blip.
Right.
Yeah. It just, I don't know, like John, Walker sucks, and they didn't make me like him anymore.
No.
So
no.
But I feel like there was some stuff that I did really like about it, but ultimately, like as I've thought about it more after the fact, I do feel like John and I did talk about this on the pod.
Gotcha.
But like, I just feel like there's so much more that they could have done that I think that could have made it a little bit. They could have tightened up a little bit if they just had, I don't know, a couple more episodes. Like, because with WandaVision, I feel like, I don't know, maybe that those first couple 2 or 3 episodes could have been condensed into like.
I liked how weird it was, though. I liked going down those rabbit holes.
I liked the weirdness, but I feel like, I just wanted because they got a full 10, and I don't know. I don't know. I just
you have to explain yourself to me. I'm not gonna like.
Yeah,
I was
WandaVision,
very into WandaVision.
Yeah. I just never felt like I got enough Wanda like in those episodes, because they were like what is this, like 23 minutes? It's like it never felt like, it just always felt like you're just getting into it, and I don't know. I just want them to like
give me the short episodes. I'm all about it.
Really?
I was disappointed when Falcon and the Winter Soldier got a little bit longer. I like the bite-sized, like I'll get up a little early. I'll get up 20 minutes ahead of time and just watch it before the day starts. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I preferred WandaVision is because I felt like it was doing something more unique to the platform of TV. Like if Marvel's going to move into TV, what can we do with that?
Yeah.
And it's not that Falcon didn't do that, because I feel like they're exploring stuff that they couldn't within the movies proper and holding time for that.
At least,
yeah. But Wanda was like, let's use this medium of TV to tell some TV stories. And I thought that was really cool. But speaking of Wanda, Andrew, Scarlet Witch is a 4 on this list. Do you resonate with this?
I mean, she's moody and emo and sensitive, has all kinds of past traumas, like for sure.
There's good things too.
No, like I mean she definitely has that the 4 aesthetic too, just the physicality of like the darker, more she's I feel good about it. I'm trying to think of like what other 4s there would be within the MCU.
Did I put any other 4s on that list?
I think that's the only one.
That's the only one.
You're right. Oh.
There's probably an X-Man. There's got to be a 4 X-Man.
Oh, I think most of the X-Men are 4.
They're very in their fields.
Like a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the first thing I thought, like, and the internet is disagreeing with me. I'm like, is Wolverine a 4? But like, I'm seeing like a lot of 8s for him.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
it's difficult. People just jump to 8 on. I think it's a reflex at this point. I think most of the New Mutants, like Magic, is a 4.
Sure. Yeah.
Danny Moonstar is probably a 4. I know the movie didn't serve those characters super well, but it's a very important run to myself.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So speaking of X-Men,
you
also did an X-Men Zodiac calendar on Twitter.
Whew, that was a while ago, but hold me to it. That's all right.
Well, I'm just fascinated.
I love the X-Men.
Yes, as do we.
Big X fan.
Okay, then we'll get into it. Did you try to align these with Zodiac?
No.
Okay,
I know nothing about the. I know nothing about the astrology. Zero thought was put into this.
Well, I will say,
I remember this happened.
My Zodiac sign was Iceman, which again, at first I was kind of like, Iceman, I don't know. Do I like Iceman that much? But then I'm like, this description, pretty good, pretty aligning with a 9. So by the end of it, I was like, I could be Iceman. I'm into that. Well, Andrew, you would be Rogue, which I think I could see that.
Okay. All right.
A deep thinker who loves helping others.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
You're able to see without prejudice and help solve problems. I'm into that.
Rogue rocks. Rogue is like
Rogue rules.
So
She's
cool.
the best.
Yeah.
I feel like
Rogue.
she was very underserved by the movies.
I had such a crush on Rogue in the animated series.
Oh, she's a babe.
1,000%.
Oh, she was a total babe.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I was like, why isn't she talking like, come on, sugar? Like, that's what I wanted.
And then the movie just did nothing for it. No shame, but it was the whole movie was like, I can't kiss my boyfriend. And
yeah. I wish that they could have gotten into the whole, Rogue and Mystique relationship and all that in the movies, but I guess maybe that'll be in a future X.
Or taking Captain Marvel's powers and being just a total tank in a fight.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
It would have rocked.
Well, I encourage folks to seek out this Zodiac calendar and see what you think.
I'm a Scorpio.
Okay.
I don't even remember what I put for myself in that.
Let's see. What month is Scorpio?
November.
All right, November. So that October 23rd is November 21st. Would that be it?
Before.
Wait, when is your birthday?
20th.
Okay, so you are this. You're Wolverine, baby.
Hell yeah. That's right, bub.
Passionate, assertive, determined, and decisive. This doesn't sound like a 9. I don't know.
No.
We'll seek the truth no matter
what.
It's not
a science. All right.
Anyway, either way, I think this list is delightful.
Thank you.
No. Okay. One thing I'm very eager to talk about, which we teased up top a little bit, is that you did an interview with the writer of the X-Men animated series episode about Nightcrawler's faith. And first of all, let's just talk Nightcrawler, because he was my favorite growing up. He bamped his way into my heart from an early age. And I love the show in the 90s. I loved that show, but I was disappointed that he wasn't a regular cast member when it launched. But then when they did this special episode, I was like, well, it almost all evens out, because they dealt with his character in such a great way in that little arc. And I rewatched it actually just this week, looking at your piece, and I was like, man, I still get emotional watching that. And this was like a Saturday morning 90s Fox Kids cartoon. And I'm just like kind of floored by how meaningful the exchange that I mentioned earlier, but just the whole, I thought Nightcrawler came across really great in that little episode. I wish there would have been more of him. But talk about, like, was that an episode that you always loved, and how did you find this guy? Like, how did this piece come to be? Did you pitch this?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. When I saw this as a kid, it was very resonant, and I was pretty young, obviously, when I saw this. But it's weird to say that I didn't feel seen in culture, because I was a young white kid. So of course I saw myself everywhere, but you still don't feel I was sort of taught to feel that Christianity was like outlawed. And if anybody, I was part of the era that at any day now Bill Clinton's going to outlaw Christianity and they're going to throw you in the gulag and that'll be that. And so then I'm watching X-Men, and this Nightcrawler episode happens, and in the episode, which is I think the only time Nightcrawler really pops up in the X-Men animated series, they find him in Germany. He lives in a monastery with monks, and has I would say fairly extraordinarily rich theological conversation with Wolverine, who's kind of pitched as like a doubting Thomas in this situation. And Nightcrawler is just effusive in his belief that the infinite love of God can overcome all obstacles, which is what has endowed him with the ability to love the people who've cast him out of his German. In all X-Men series, the mob is portrayed as sort of this like these 1800s peasants with clubs, and they look very Dickensian, and so they look like they're from the set of Les Mis, and which is true of this series as well.
It literally have like a log battering ram, like breaking down the door.
They have like ripped clothing. They look like they're from the Beauty and the Beast extras.
Exactly.
Like they're marching into the Beast castle.
It's Europe. There's weird stuff going on. We don't know what's going on.
And this is supposed to be the 90s,
right?
But the dialogue is really, really rich, and far what was more thoughtful than anything I was getting from the stupid ass Christian cartoons that I was being force fed at that age.
Deep theological meanings of McGee and me.
Yeah, which were all about being nice. And here Nightcrawler is kind of talking about, theodicy with Wolverine, and why does God allow bad things to happen to good people, and embracing that tension in a very like it was. So from that, so I was a Nightcrawler. I was a Kurt Wagner stan from that then on for sure.
Okay.
And it just lived rent free in my head for a long time. And at some point, I think the I guess she's not the Atlantic, Liz Brunig, the Catholic socialist writer, tweeted about it. And I was like, oh, so this wasn't just me. There's more than one person out there who connected with this. And given my work at Relevant, maybe there's a story here. So this was a case of me asking for forgiveness instead of permission. I went rogue and just started. I did some Googling and found this guy's, I think I found his Twitter and just reached out in the DMs. And he was more than happy to talk about it, and ended up being a I really loved the conversation. He remembered it. This was 30 years probably after he had actually written that episode.
Wow.
And he was really willing to talk about it. And I remember him saying that he had at first written it with a little less theology. He is now he's a Christian man. And had written it a little more maybe dry and platonic, and turned it over to the producers, and they told him to go deeper. So they said, we really want to explore these tensions with him, which now shocks me. I have a really hard time believing that, because it's really hard to imagine. I don't think that's happening at Paw Patrol. I don't know. No. Like I'm not watching Saturday morning cartoons these days. I don't know what's happening. Maybe there's some really
Chase
good.
Is not asking Marshall why bad things happen to good pups.
But
I mean, this was like what, 93, 94?
Probably
like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also just loved that, I love that Wolverine pushed back.
Yeah.
He's like, don't give me these easy answers. Don't you think
Bob.
I've tried?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Don't do it, bub.
He's like, I've tried this. I've been down this road before. And I love that there was that dialogue where it wasn't just like Nightcrawler's giving him the answer and everybody's like, okay, sounds great. But showing I love that. That gives depth to and humanity to both people, where it's just like that you get to see both of those characters sort of wrestling with like loss, and Nightcrawler's not pretending like he didn't experience loss and hurt, and showing that like Logan was like, he was also searching for meaning, and he's not like just some callous, violent person, that he was trying to reconcile his own past traumas. And like, I loved that. And that's just for a Saturday morning cartoon. Like
I've never seen really anything like it.
Yeah.
Since then, maybe Fleabag would be the closest thing I've seen since then. That really kind of hit that same vibe of giving respect to both the believer and the skeptic. Yeah. And taking both of their identities very, very seriously.
Yeah.
But that was the first one, and then you also have Rogue and Gambit in the X-Men here, who are a little bit tertiary. Gambit is an apostate and is beyond redemption, and we knew that coming into the episode, so that's not a surprise to anybody. Right. And Rogue is a little more. She's kind of going back and forth. You see all sides represented in it. But it's remains a pretty important episode of television for me, even now as a grown up, and it was formative when I saw it in an important way.
Yeah. What do we all think about spoiler alert, Wolverine praying in the church?
Yeah.
At the end of
Pro that. Because, well, I want to give our guest the chance to answer, but I wanted to jump in and just say quickly, I love that. So it has this ending where, as we said earlier, Wolverine basically asks Nightcrawler, how could a good God make bad things happen to good people, like with me? And Nightcrawler's answer was, our ability to understand God's purpose is limited, but we take comfort in the fact that God's love is limitless. And he kind of like that form of evangelizing to Wolverine is this like sort of persistent gentleness, and like he does not go after Wolverine, but he kind of meets him where he's at. And at the end of the episode, he gives him a Bible that's marked with specific passages that he thinks will be relevant to him. And you could see this kind of character dynamic played out in maybe like a focus on the family Christian narrative in a way that would be a bummer. But in this case, what it does for Wolverine is like by the end of the episode, he's in a church praying with this Bible. So I'm like, that doesn't mean now Wolverine has accepted Jesus as his personal savior and whatever, but like it does mean that he's had a profound that interaction meant something to him. And so I always responded that like that's the way to sort of share faith in the sort of loving way that Nightcrawler did. But I don't know, what do you think, Tyler?
I think you're right. I think that I even remember this. I remember that. So the first time, I'll try to make this make sense. I think at Relevant, we wrote this like very short, kind of like throwback. We call them slices, just a really short piece about like, hey, remember that time Wolverine became a Christian on the X-Men episode, and like a clip of it in there and whatever. And then I went and found the writer, Len Olhay is the name of the author, and we were speaking, and he pushed back on our assessment. He said I don't think Wolverine became a Christian in that. I think that his interaction with Nightcrawler kind of opened him to the idea of a spiritual reality that was meaningful for him, but it just showed that he was willing to continue on a journey himself. Not necessarily that he had arrived at a ending point. And that was a really great edit for me that I thought was really important and was absolutely true when you actually watch the narrative without any preconceived biases that I bring in as somebody who was raised in which every spiritual 20 minutes, any spiritually themed 20 minutes has to end with somebody praying the sinner's prayer, which that kind of shows my own like predisposition to, well, there he is. He prayed the prayer. That or mud bang, story's over. So yes, I absolutely agree that it kind of showed that maybe he had gone through a little bit of a transition or found something at least momentarily meaningful in the Christian faith, but had not necessarily converted or anything.
Yeah. I encourage folks to find this interview because I really loved hearing from this guy. He also wrote for Gargoyles, which was another personal favorite of mine.
Fucking
and
awesome.
It's still, it holds up. Check it out on Disney Plus if you haven't watched it since then, because another show that really deals with some complex things.
Amazing show.
So good.
I want to say one thing before, because I was hearing a transition there, John. But I wanted to say one thing, and for me as someone who is, you know, I am an apostate, unlike, you know, in a similar way.
Gambit.
I'm very Gambit.
You're always calm to share.
I'm always, you know, saying smart ass things and you know, and shrugging about it. But
deck of cards, just
throwing deck of cards, just blowing things up.
It's cool. It's so cool.
It's cool.
Gambit's so cool.
He's so cool. He's so cool in his nonchalance. Like, who doesn't want to
be like him still?
The trench coat. Yeah, nothing weird about that.
Little weird head covering thing.
Like a guile from Street Fighter. Yeah.
Right.
Dude.
Anyway.
Black soulless eyes or red eyes. I can't remember what his eyes color, but they're like just like dark. But anyway, the one thing that I appreciated about Nightcrawler and that interaction with Wolverine in a way that you talked about, like how in a Focus on the Family or like a McGee and Me sort of situation, that there would be some understood, like there'd be like some sort of transactional like thing taking place where, you know, it's like there's this expectation that they would become a Christian, but like I never got I never thought like that if Wolverine didn't pray or didn't become a Christian or didn't change, like I never got the impression that Nightcrawler would not care about him anymore. That's
a good point.
That there's not an expectation from Nightcrawler for Wolverine to do a certain thing. Like does Nightcrawler want there to be some sort of understanding on Wolverine's part of God's love and experience healing? Like sure, like Nightcrawler wants that for himself too, but like it's not like he would be disowned, like that Nightcrawler wouldn't want to have anything to do with Wolverine. And so that's something that I appreciated, that was communicated to me through that episode.
I think that's really, there is if you don't mind me hawking something that's kind of tangentially related here. Yeah. There is a current series that just issue number 2 just released. So if you want to get in on it, you can. But it is called The Way of X. It is written by Cy Spurrier, and it is about Nightcrawler trying to find out, trying to create see if religion works for mutants, since religion comes from humans. Is there a version of religion that works for mutants? And this is as somebody who reads a lot of comics and is especially interested in religion and comics, it's sort of my intersection of interests. This one really works. Cy Spurrier, a really phenomenal, wonderfully intellectual comic book writer, taking one of my all-time favorite characters and exploring the thing that I'm most interested in about that character. If this part of the conversation intrigues you, then I would encourage you to go check that out, because it is 2 issues in. It's been very, very fun to read this.
Is this on is this on the Marvel Unlimited app?
Not yet, but it will be.
Not yet. Okay.
They're like I think it's like a 3-month situation before they start hitting there, so you got to wait just a little bit. But
yeah, all right.
You're getting there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say about the kind of what you were saying, Andrew. I mean, the thing that strikes me about what happens with Wolverine is, like, this is a guy who's lived 100 years or whatever, and I'm sure he's had all kinds of different moments of interaction with God over that time. And obviously what comes across is that he's cynical and weary. Yeah. But like, obviously that's what makes it powerful, is he's not saying, you gave me all the answers, Nightcrawler, you're the best, or whatever. He's like taking
classic Wolverine.
Yeah. This like meaningful interaction and ending in a place where you're not totally sure, but it's like, as someone who no doubt has like yo-yoed along what he's thought about God and the universe over that century, it's a really profound moment that's kind of where we find him. So I like that for his character specifically, that it's like not this definitive moment, but it is like, even through everything he's been through and seen, he finds himself back here because of this interaction that he had. Yeah. So anyway, man, what a good episode of 90s Kids TV, and thank you for unpacking it for us all.
Of course, like I said, rent free in my head, so always down to I could deliver a TED talk on it at the drop of a hat.
That sounds great. Andrew, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the X-Men and Nightcrawler kind of like Friends of Humanity thread.
So I want to talk about a couple things, that being one of them, the sort of almost like a neo-fascist, white supremacist, some sort of nationalist organization. But also, you had talked about in one of your recent Cape Town episodes talking about Captain America and the planting yourself like a tree along the river of truth and saying no, move, and how I'm seeing that line sort of usurped by right-wing people. And so I kind of wanted to have this larger conversation about ways that comics, and especially a lot of Marvel comics, have and Marvel characters have talked about extremism and fascism and othering people and the outsiders versus the weaponizing of fear. And there's definitely a lot of that within Captain America. There's some of that within, you look at the X-Men and in this Friends of Humanity, how it's like this, it sounds like a really great group, how they, the politics making it like it's a politically expedient way of like to name something that sounds great, but it's truly, it's actually a monstrous thing. So I kind of wanted to talk about like what sort of lessons can people get from comics that maybe they're not totally picking up on, because it's like some of that seems pretty clear to me. And have you also seen, I'm specifically seeing this, getting back to Captain America, within like the Jordan Peterson community of people, especially now with like the whole Coates run of Captain America, and essentially just like making Red Skull a sort of
JP
Jordan
surrogate.
And how they're like, I saw one article where somebody wrote that like this line, this like plant yourself line, could have been taken directly from a Jordan Peterson book. And it's like this definition of like who defines what truth is, you know? And I know this is like just like a sort of like long meandering cluster of questions, but I kind of wanted to like get some of your thoughts on all of these things.
Sure. Well, something I wrestled with quite a bit, because I think that Marvel Comics in its infancy, and maybe even in its glory days, and even still until today, and a lot of the writing is pretty subversive in its the X-Men have always been very explicitly, however poorly utilized, a metaphor for ostracized groups in the US and in the world. And sometimes that's been handled better than others. I think sometimes it's been utilized downright offensively, but that has been the ultimate goal behind it. Same with people like Spider-Man. And I think even characters like the Black Panther have been, at the time when Black Panther was introduced as the first Black superhero in mainstream comics, the idea there was a secret African nation that was far superior to anything that in the United States was a fairly controversial. It was so controversial, in fact, that the evidently early drafts of the Black Panther's costume showed more of his skin so that you could see that it was a black man under it. And the rumor is, which has never been confirmed, but the rumor is that the suits got nervous and pulled the at the last second, said that for the cover, the entire costume had to cover his entire body, because otherwise they were worried people would get too upset. And even all the way back to Captain America Comics #1, the U.S. had not yet entered World War II. It was considered too controversial to enter into the war. And then Jack Kirby puts out this comic with Captain America punching Hitler in the face, and they got death threats about this. So I think that at its roots, you have a pretty punk rock aesthetic to a lot of Marvel Comics energy. But anything that is popular, and we see this over and over and over, is going to be co-opted by the mainstream, and the rough edges are going to be sanded down until they kind of fit. And that's certainly what we've seen, particularly since Disney bought Marvel. And I say this as a fan of the Marvel movies. I like a lot of them, and I think a lot of the creators there have fought for some fairly interesting social ideas to be placed within those, particularly obviously Black Panther. But I think that no matter how much individual writers may try to introduce some sort of subversive ideas to Captain America as somebody who maybe doesn't agree with the current, the ongoing administration, or with capitalism writ large, or the CIA or the Pentagon, no matter how much people try to write that into the character, even Marvel is not bigger than the American narrative, and that is ultimately going to be swallowed up by people who like to wear shirts with the shield on it, or cops with the Punisher badge, or and the nuance is just not going to survive these cultural narratives that we build for ourselves. And I think that's really unfortunate, because I do think the stories themselves have a lot of power to redirect the myths that we tell. But unfortunately, we're fighting against an extraordinarily powerful mythology that can swallow up even something as powerful as Disney. and can beat it sort of into its own will. Because I don't want to wear I love Captain America. I don't want to wear a Captain America shirt to the gym. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't like what that says about me. Like, what people are going to assume about who I am because of that. I don't want to do that.
Sure.
So that's, I guess that's where Jordan Peterson's monomyth idea is I think it's very stupid, but I think it is true insofar as it's what we in America have learned to build our world around, and we will squeeze any characters we have into that by hook or by crook, whether or not they actually fit in their original intent.
I'll tell you, watching Jordan Peterson fans get big mad in real time over that comic. I was just like, it was giving me life. Like when Jordan
Peterson's Ta-Nehisi isn't even online, so they can't. There's no manager to complain to. You know,
it's just like Jordan Peterson's like literally like, what the hell?
Yeah,
so good. And it's like, not even for a second did these people think, if my ideology can seamlessly transition to like this horrific supervillain.
Yeah.
It's like that Principal Skinner like meme. It's like am I wrong? No. It's them that are wrong. It's like
right.
No.
Or that what's the comedy sketch, the British one, where he's like, "Are we the baddies?" Like the Nazis are asking themselves.
Yes,
that.
It feels like a brief, like that moment of clarity that you just have to reject.
Yeah. Hold on. Am I Red Skull? Maybe not where I want to be.
Come on, you're almost there. You're almost
you
there.
You see it like twice a year when somebody realizes Rage Against the Machine is not on their side anymore.
right.
Somebody becomes the main person of the day on Twitter because I wish Rage would just stay out of politics. And it happens every day in comic books.
Yeah. And then there's
ask Tom Morello. It's like, what do you know about politics? Like, let's see. Well, I'm pretty sure he like went to Harvard and like got like some sort of degree in like political science and like, so I think he's all set.
Yeah. What machine did you think we were raging against? the dishwasher?
Right. I will say that I give a little bit of credit to the two Disney shows so far for leaning further into social issues than I expected.
Yeah.
And maybe the shows become a bit of a place where they can explore that stuff. Because even if, as we're saying, some of Falcon and Winter Soldier was like a little muddled or maybe not quite there, I didn't expect it to touch on all the stuff that it did.
They definitely tried.
Yeah, they tried.
Which is a big deal. I'm serious. And that I would say they tried, and that to me was surprising. They tried in ways I wasn't expecting. They threw the US military under the bus. And you don't see that from a lot of mainstream like TV.
Right. Yeah. Especially on Disney Plus.
Nope.
But yeah, one thing we talked about on the pod before the show launched was the history of sort of like Flag Smasher in the comics and these different characters that were in Cap's orbit. And we read the panel from, I think it was the 1968 issue, which is like obviously a very volatile year in the country, but that's where he fights Flag Smasher and he says, he's got a speech about, America is made up of a multitude of different ethnic groups, each of which has had its own part to contribute to our American culture. Be proud of our heritage, but never let that pride make you forget that beneath it all, we are all human beings. So anyway, just this like, don't let nationalism blind you from what we're like trying to do as humans, which is like another, as you're saying, kind of subversive thing for this figure who's supposed to represent America to be saying in the 60s. And we were kind of like, what energy around like Flag Smasher and this ethos is going to make it into the show? And I was kind of surprised that a fair amount of that sort of did. So
it really did. Yeah. And I think it was, and I think the plant yourself like a tree by the river of truth, like it's a pretty beautiful speech, but I think that it is important. Well, it's what I was talking about earlier. Like I find it's very easy for me to idealize people who have that moral conviction that I feel like I just never really had, that this is right and this is wrong and I'm going to do what's right no matter what. And I think that you can find people inspiring and even sort of clarifying without then deputizing yourself at it. And that's what I'm never going to listen to anybody else ever,
Sure.
because that's what a superhero does. Like, I think it's good to have moral convictions about things. I think it's good to speak with moral clarity. I think it is bad. And I think sometimes the comics are willing to explore the idea that it's bad, that Captain America doesn't really listen to anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of a problem with a number of heroes, especially someone like Batman, someone who has like, I mean, I know, John, you're a Batman fan, but like,
it's a cool shirt, man.
You
get the Batman animated series t-shirt. It's cool. I wish I had one.
Yeah.
Is that new?
I've had it for a while.
Okay,
but,
cool.
Wanted to bring it out tonight.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate that. I should have brought.
Anyway.
I got some superhero shirts. I should have put one. I don't know. I got the tattoo.
That counts. But you're saying, yes, Batman can be a complicated figure along these lines, Andrew, right?
But he can be pretty fashy,
Yes. A white billionaire beating homeless people up. Yeah, not always great.
Yeah, and it's also, without getting too much into the weeds of DC stuff, it's actually one of the reasons I'm not especially looking forward to this new Robert Pattinson Batman, because
disagree.
I'm counting down the days, my friend.
Okay, well, here's what I'll say. Just based on the trailer, it's like I like, do we need like another even more gritty Batman, who's like literally like pummeling some dude's skull to nothing, and he's like, I am vengeance. It's like, aren't you supposed to be a detective? Like, and you're just like beating the shit out of someone like mercilessly. And it's just like there's like, and of course that's a trailer, maybe supposed to get people hyped up, but like, I'm just hoping that there's a little bit of like nuance and that like, he's just not like punching his way out of like literally everything. And it's one of my criticisms of DC properties is that what Marvel has figured out is that I just feel like DC, with the exception of the new Suicide Squad that's going to be coming out, like DC seems to be a little self-serious, and the MCU has figured out, like, because I was talking with one of my friends recently about like Phase 4 stuff, and he's like, yeah, some of the stuff looks really fun, and I was like, yes, fun. I'm not this new Batman movie. I'm not like, oh man, that looks really fun. Like there's just like, there's like a level of excitement for me with like some of this new stuff coming out in MCU that I'm like, oh, this looks like, I'm like excited. And then like, but the new Suicide Squad one, like, I'm like, oh, there's a fucking shark guy. That guy looks, that looks
by Sly Stallone, for God's sakes.
I'm like,
cool.
That does look fun, and like that does look exciting. And
yes, I 100% agree that, especially the Snyder movies, they're just too. They Marvel has allowed themselves to build a world where things aren't quite as serious, so it lowers the stakes enough to where you can kind of just buy that all of this is happening in a world where maybe it makes sense for a guy to put on an American flag outfit with a shield and go out there and sling the shield around a little bit. And DC hasn't quite gotten why somebody would do that. All I would say is I really do trust in Matt Reeves as a director, as a filmmaker. I think those Apes movies are just phenomenal. I really love his Apes trilogy. And he sells the idea of a planet of talking monkeys with seriousness that just works there. It's so emotionally compelling to me, those movies, and I think that if he can bring that energy to the Batman, then I'm very interested. And I think they could be. I remember I was reading an interview with Pattinson about this, And he said what drew him is he never wants to play a character who is obviously a good or bad guy. And if they can pitch the idea that Batman beating some poor random, like, struggling person on the streets halfway to death as being maybe not like the morally correct thing to do in that situation, then I'm very interested in seeing where it goes. From Matt Reeves, not from Zack Snyder, not even from Christopher Nolan necessarily, but definitely from Matt Reeves.
Here's what I'll say briefly as a Batman defender. Batman 89, the Tim Burton movie, and then the Batman animated series are sort of my platonic ideal for Batman. I feel like they both balance the scary stuff and the fun. And I love the Nolan trilogy in a lot of ways. I think it's great filmmaking, but I do agree that at times it loses the fun, Andrew. Mm-hmm. And then everything that DC has done post those movies mostly has been trash. Like that Zack Snyder is the guy with the keys to the kingdom, and he's just not a very good filmmaker is what bums me out more than anything about all of it. That I'm like, these aren't how these characters are supposed to act. Like you can't introduce Batman fighting Superman. That takes decades of, whatever. So all this stuff, I do think Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman is really good. I'll say that. And if you want fun DC, the Harley Quinn animated show is really good. I'll say that too.
It's kind of amazing.
It's actually, really, at first I was like, this is funny, but kind of dumb. And by the end, I'm like very moved by where the characters go.
It's very thoughtful. It's very good.
Really good. So anyway, I do agree with you ultimately, Andrew. Here's what I'll say. Going through this like DC universe thing and seeing my beloved Batman tarnished sort of made me like throw my hands up and be like, I can't control what they do with these movies. It's just like the comics where some of them are good and some of them are bad and some of them are mixed. And like, what I will say is I cringed when the climax of that trailer was him beating the shit out of that guy.
Yeah.
But do I think this does look like an interesting version of Batman where maybe the detective element will be a little more in there? That is exciting to me. So I have no idea how it's going to turn out, but I'm much more intrigued by that than anything we've seen since like Dark Knight, probably.
All right. Well, both you guys are convincing me a little bit that like to maybe be a little bit more cautiously optimistic about that it's in better hands than other properties.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I'm ready to be on.
The main thing I'm excited about is something you sent me first a while ago, Andrew, which is that they just announced this week the new Batman animated series.
Yes.
It's called Batman Caped Crusader.
Back in, right?
Yeah, Bruce Timm from the original animated series, J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves are doing a noir-focused Batman animated series, which just like, I don't know, I just like passed out when I read that. So very excited for that. And I think that could hold that balance of the fun and the serious that I'm hoping for. Tyler, you've been very generous with your time. We have a lightning round of questions that we will get to, but first we do have a who would Marvel characters' favorite CCM artists be question we need to explore.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Break it down for us,
All
Andrew.
in. Yeah.
All right. So I have
intersection.
I have these are just sort of 6 kind of random characters who I thought would be interesting, then would give some diverse answers. I have some ideas. I have my own ideas. I kind of wanted to see where you would go with this.
Okay.
But let's start off with MCU characters' favorite CCM artists. Who would Captain America's favorite CCM artist be? Okay,
I think he'd be pretty old school, right? So you'd probably be going back to, I mean, since most of the, there's no barbershop quartet CCM artist or anything like that. I'm going to go with like maybe an Andre Crouch type guy, like somebody who's pretty traditional. The gospel choir would make him feel kind of new, but it would, I think Andre might be the move there.
I was trying to think, I'm like, is there something that has like a 30s sort of like jazzy big band, even like, I mean, I couldn't
use that. No way. It'd be maybe the Gaither vocal,
I was gonna say the Gaithers seem like a potential good fit.
Yeah. I didn't have a solid one. I threw down, I was looking for something sort of like in the more chill element. I went with Caedmon's Call as something maybe a little bit more. It's just, but I have a question mark. I didn't feel very good.
I think you'd have to go pretty old. I don't think it'd be CCM. I think it'd be like Larry Norman, if even that, you know. I think Larry Norman might be a little like radical for Captain America, Steve Rogers.
Fair.
He listens to a lot of big band.
Yeah.
I did like that line in Falcon and Winter Soldier when Bucky was like, I listen to music from the 40s when somebody was like asking about something modern. Anyway.
What about Nightcrawler?
I think actually Nightcrawler. So Nightcrawler, we've talked a lot about his like spiritual side, but he also in the comics traditionally has a very swashbuckling side. He loves like the very dashing like Gene Kelly, like those. So I think he has a very adventurous, like very open-minded side of him that I think would lend itself to I'm gonna say somebody like, I'm gonna go like kind of mid-aughts indie, like maybe Arcade Fire is a little too basic, maybe more like a Decemberists vibe somewhere in that line, or maybe even go back a little bit to Neutral Milk. Just somebody who would be that's not CCM. What am I talking about?
I'm trying to think what the CCM equivalent of those bands would be.
I don't know if that exists. CCM. So he would. So it wouldn't be. I don't think he would do Gregorian chant. I don't think he would do. That's way too old.
I had Jars of Clay because they incorporate some of those monk chants,
dashing.
Like,
especially in the early stuff.
Yeah, like the first song, Liquid, has that.
I like Jars. I like Jars. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think he would be very into the. I think I know this isn't quite CCM, but I think Mountain Goats would be very much up his alley.
Yeah, he'd like that.
You know,
Nice.
I know he sings about Christian stuff, and I think John Darnielle and Kurt Wagner would have a very good conversation. I think
that sounds like some fanfic I might have to
write.
Okay. What about Loki?
Oh, that's a good question. Loki is probably not a big CCM guy, but if he had to listen to, if he did have to listen, I think it would be, I think it would probably, he'd go one of two ways. I think he would either go like early aughts industrial, like Skillet, like the very, I think he'd be kind of into the weird, vaguely bindage, like which is fine, but I think that would kind of like suit his situation. Or just like totally tacky, like Point of Grace, like super into the cheese of it.
He'd be either like go something that like totally fits his aesthetic, or he would like throw on something and then someone would walk in the room and he'd like quickly like change it.
Yeah. I think he would be, to everybody else, he'd be like, I don't listen to the Mortals music, but when they he'd turn it back on, maybe bump it up a little bit. Oh, Amy, 100%. Amy Grant. Yeah, I think that's the Loki situation. He would love it.
I love it.
Him dancing to
the Christmas
Baby
album for sure.
Sure.
For sure.
Andrew, I think he might be an Elevati fan.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a band that we've discussed a few times on the pod recently, Tyler. They're like a Scandinavian folk metal band with like violins and hurdy-gurdies and Celtic vocals. And
can I get a link out of the?
We'll hook you up.
Okay. But I'm definitely hook you up.
What's the CCM equivalent to Elevati? That's what he might be into.
Yeah, anyway. I was trying to look up. I'm like, is there a Christian folk or Viking metal band? and there are some Viking metal Christian bands that I've never heard of. But
well, get them on the
pod. Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, so Wanda is obviously going to be, she's got a little bit of a goth energy to her, right? She's a little bit got that kind of darkness. I think that it's twofold. I think that Around the Company of Others, it is like a little bit of the alt rock, like the Plum or the but also be in that vein, like just a little too edgy for Caleb, but not too like, but mom can still listen to it.
Sure.
What was Katy Perry before she became Katy Perry?
There you
Katy
go.
Hudson, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But then I think when she's alone, when she's hitting the gym, then that's when she gets into the Blind Side, the Stave Saker, that sort of. I think she's more than willing to go like totally hardcore when she's by herself to get the demons out.
I was wondering if because she's like has this love of sitcoms, if there would be some sort of like, she'd like have some sort of connection to more goofy bands like Calibretto 13 or 5 Iron.
Oh yeah.
Because you think about like, like in the show, at least they had that Malcolm in the Middle style, and then They Might Be Giants theme, and like also with Calibretto 13, the lead singer of Calibretto went on to start a band called Harley Poe, which is like more of like kind of like a horror theme to it, which like also kind of fits in with her maybe a little darker vibe.
I think that she could also be, if we're talking about like coming through sitcoms, you have like Sleeping at Last, who was on Grey's.
Okay.
And
I like that.
Could have been, that could be, I could see her getting really into that.
Especially her Enneagram 4 side, getting a little bit more emo.
Really into, so then you maybe got like May or Forever. That whole thing.
Some of that early Dashboard.
Exactly. Yeah. If we're selling the Christian route, like kind of vaguely Christian, like mostly Christian because they don't say they're not Christian for sure.
Juliana
so
Theory.
Sure. Yeah, Juliana. Yeah.
Wanda's like, they're not a Christian band, they're Christians in a band. That's her vibe.
Is she single? What's her deal?
Vision, bro.
Damn it. Bruce Banner, but then the Hulk.
Yeah, sure. So Bruce Banner is going to be into Bruce Banner's a Caedmon's Call guy. I think for sure. And then Hulk, I think, is the easy version would be he's like really into hardcore, like to say he's Lamb of God and all that. But I don't know. Negative. I think it'd be more like the post-hardcore, see like Showbread maybe.
Nice.
I like that
thing. I think that'd be a little more his vibe.
Do you just made one of our listeners extremely happy right now.
Do you have a Showbread stand on the air?
Yeah,
multiple
Meg.
Showbreads, but one in particular.
Okay.
Meg, she is
the Showbread heads.
She's a Showbread. She's a showhead for sure.
Okay.
I just pictured like Hulk with the glasses on, like like at the show, just like with his arm nodding along. That'd be awesome.
Too cool for school, standing in the back.
Yeah, he's got to be in the back. He can't go in the front. That's not fair.
Okay, and last but not least, certainly not least, Okoye.
Oh, Okoye doesn't listen to CCM.
Fair.
We gotta. I mean, I think she would enjoy it if she tried some of it. But there's just no way, right?
What kind of worship music is going on in Wakanda? That's a good question.
Yeah, what's the Christian scene? Hillsong is not made.
They have not planted there yet.
Yeah, I don't think that has been permitted.
They're not getting
Wakanda.
past that laser shield for sure.
Okay, Okoye. Ooh. I could see maybe the case for like maybe Kirk, some Kirk Franklin stuff.
Yeah, all right, I see that.
He stayed pretty relevant all these years. He's on today, that new Space Jam track released with Lil Baby. It's pretty great. Cool. I gotta say, it really rocks.
Into it.
And I think that Okoye could be into the late Kirk Franklin oeuvre, maybe.
Can see that.
I in my mind, the just like absolute intensity of her as a character, I saw her as definitely metal. Like we're talking like Zayo, Living Sacrifice, and just like, and John and I were talking this off, before you came on. And I just envision her with like earbuds in, like just like getting ready to train or do something.
Yeah,
and she just like unflinching.
Gym, yeah.
She's not like, and she's just vibing. She's not like moving. she's not like dancing or getting pumped up. She's just sort of like taking it in and just like harnessing the energy of like just like the brutality of the music, and then just like, I don't know.
Love this for her, by the way.
Yeah.
Just like thought about this like way too much.
We were saying we need to make a video of this, like the Dora Milaje, just like rocking out to some Living Sacrifice.
That scene in Falcon and Winter Soldier where they're just owning John Walker's ass.
Just throw John Walker around like a basketball.
I know. They're just like, you're doing great, John. That
might have been the
like
best line Sebastian Stan has ever delivered.
Oh, one of my favorite moments in that whole all those episodes.
Whatever my misgivings are about the show as a whole are redeemed in that moment.
I know. Just
100%.
just like getting tossed. I loved it. Oh, it sucked so hard. But all right. Anyway, those were
okay.
But we have John has some other lightning questions.
Moving into the home stretch here, we're doing lightning round. I'm gonna do a few.
I could go all night. We're good.
Okay, cool.
Bring them on.
All right, I'm gonna do a few. Then Andrew's gonna do a few.
Okay.
All right. Best Adventures in Odyssey episode: The Case of the Secret Room or The Search for Wit?
Case of the Secret Room.
Okay.
Yeah. I like The Search for Wit, but Case of the Secret Room was pretty core to me. It was an important one.
Folks should listen to your Good Christian Fun episode where you talk about Adventures in Odyssey, because I found that deeply enjoyable. And I will say, like, again, I appreciated that looking back on it, like actually pretty well constructed narrative there.
Lots of surprisingly good stuff. Yeah. You wouldn't, they're more craft than it needed. They were punching above their weight, I would say.
Yes, indeed. Did you happen to ever hear of, and Andrew, I'm not sure this is something I've ever brought up on the pod, GT and the Halo Express?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I got news for you, my friend.
Yeah.
My mom played Guardian the Angel.
That's not true. You are lying.
Oh, man. I didn't think this information would.
Mom played.
She's Guardian. I used to go to recording sessions where she'd be like, oh, GT now, or whatever. Are you familiar with this, Andrew?
I've heard your mom.
Yeah,
and I've listened to. I hear her voice in my head. Right, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I had those tapes.
Awesome. This is.
I was a supporter of your your local industry there.
I don't.
Oh, that is wild. Wow.
I have so rarely shared this bit of information and had it register with anyone, so I thought you might be a good candidate for that.
I totally know what you're talking about, and I can hear her voice. That rocks. You should have led with that.
Sorry, maybe GT's more important than I realize. She didn't do all of them, where there were a ton of them, but she did like the early ones. And I don't know what the connection was, but for some reason she was doing them at the studio in the Twin Cities with like a troupe. And I might have to ask her more questions about that. Get her on the pod.
Yeah, well, if you enter an episode with your mom and bring me in as a guest, I will be there.
Sounds good. If you need the oral history of GT, my mom is available.
I would love to.
Okay, moving on. This wasn't very lightning-y. Better Amy Grant Christmas album, Home for Christmas or Amy Grant, a Christmas album?
It's Home for Christmas. No question.
Wow. I think that's a hot take. I gotta say.
Yeah, but not even close for me.
Because of sentimental reasons?
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. On the other hand, he is the Holy One, King of Kings of the night. Amen. All-timer. Anyway, both good choices. You can't go wrong. Okay, comics. More emotional MCU moment. Tony Stark's final scene or Killmonger's final speech?
I'm gonna go Killmonger. I am because Michael B. really just a home run of a scene that I'm gonna go Killmonger's final speech.
I like it. Even before Chadwick died, I would rewatch that scene periodically, like at work or whatever, and just start crying. I think it's like so beautiful, and I love how they capture the characters. And I think he might give the best performance in all of the MCU, maybe. Anyway,
and it's filmed so well. It's just so like good. It's shot really beautifully. Coogler really like it's a flex. It's great.
In the same way that you're saying you trust Matt Reeves to do Batman well, there are so many questions about what will happen with Black Panther 2, but I trust Ryan Coogler with anything, man. He'll do the right thing. I don't
necessarily trust Disney with what's next, but I do trust Ryan Coogler with what's next.
Fair. Hopefully they'll give him the sort of carte blanche to do what he wants since he delivered so well with the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. More pump your fist in the air cheering MCU moment. Cap catching Mjolnir or Spider-Man showing up for the first time in Civil War?
It's Cap catching Mjolnir for me.
Yeah.
I have a lot of love for Spider-Man's first appearance.
Sure.
And I remember that very fondly when I saw that with a buddy of mine here in Nashville who's a big Spidey fan. Who was like he was like crying when he saw it happen.
Yeah.
But Cap catching Mjolnir for me, as Captain America kind of been like my guy for a long time. So that was awesome. I shouted in a movie theater, and I don't do that very much, but I did shout in the movie theater.
100%. Cap is also my favorite Marvel character. Well, at least in the MCU characters. We're not counting Nightcrawler and that stuff. But I mean, there are so many moments in Endgame that could qualify for that, but that is the one that I remember the most, just like freaking out about. I mean,
you've seen it so
on your left,
times.
There's Avengers Assemble, but the catching the hammer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It rocks.
It rocks. Okay. Speaking of Nashville, one more for me here. More important Nashville venue, the Ryman or Rocketown?
John, I don't think you said that right.
Rocketown.
So I got a lot of love for Rocketown and for all the good work that they have done there. I do have to give the edge to the Ryman for the many great shows I've seen there. And also I don't think I've been to a couple of episodes of church is what I was going to say.
That's what it feels like these days.
Telling. I've been to a couple of church services there that have not been particularly moving, but I've been to the Ryman with my wife for some shows that have been really like very special for us. I saw Jason Isbell there with Liz, and that like changed me like at a molecular level. Seeing that.
I keep trying to sell people. I was just in our MagPod Patreon Discord today talking about Jason Isbell and how beautiful of a record Southeastern is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and people who are like a little bit more hesitant on country. And I'm just like,
sure.
But like,
understandable.
Like, I get it. Like, but like you get so much more with someone like Jason Isbell than you do with just like any like billion pop country people. There's just so much there.
Country barely works for what Isbell's doing. Like it's the right genre for him, but I'm not somebody who would say that I like country. I don't listen to country music as regular, but I'll listen to anything Jason Isbell puts out for the rest of my life. No questions asked.
I mean,
seeing him live at the Ryman was a really special experience.
I mean, I just like the Sturgill Simpson does something similar for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Just like they're talking about the real shit. Like, which is what country
kind of used to do.
I know.
Listen to Johnny and Waylon and all those guys.
It's also why I love Irish trad music, because they're like, they're telling stories, it's just, there's just something beautiful about someone just telling a tale about, their family or hardship or something that feels authentic, or like someone like Sturgill, who is like talking about like, drugs opening up his mind to about things about God. And I'm just like, that's not your typical country, guy from Kentucky song,
No.
So there's just
It's not what you're getting from George Strait or the Florida Georgia line for sure.
Florida Georgia line talking about like psilocybin. I would love to see that.
I've seen Isbell live multiple times, but to see him at the Ryman would be truly next level. It broke my heart to not be able to see any shows there while I was there. I got to go back and do Nashville right.
It's pretty special, man. It's pretty special. I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to going back. I've not been to a concert since things started kind of opening back up, but
same.
But bought a couple of tickets to see Rustin Kelly in November down there, and really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I haven't been to any shows either. I walked around the Ryman inside, which was cool.
It's a really pretty venue.
It's really
very
cool.
Yeah.
And I went to the outside of Rocketown, but did not go inside.
Yeah.
Just to post a picture to send to Andrew.
It's all right. The song was great.
Yeah.
The Brave Saint Saturn cover of the Rocketown song.
That's how Rocketown became a staple of our pod, is through that cover.
Yeah. I got it. It was confirmed through Reese that the only reason that song is on that Brave Saint Saturn record is Rocket. That's the only reason.
In it.
It had Rocket in
spacey.
it. It's spacey, so that's the only reason. There's nothing deeper to it.
You know what? That's great. It's a great cover.
Yeah, it works.
It's the only reason my parents have ever listened to Brave Saint Saturn, and that has to count for something.
Fair.
All right, your turn.
Right. Okay.
All right.
I got some Nashville specific question.
Okay.
Best hot chicken, Prince's or Bolton's?
Prince's.
That was fast.
Yeah. There seems to be like you look at some lists and there seems to be some
There's debate.
Top 3 debates about, who's Prince's seems to be like the
Prince's is the
OG.
Prince's got ripped off when the story about Nashville hot chicken is really fascinating, and there's some really great articles out there. So I will always rep for them because Prince's invented hot chicken. But I do think that they do it best. It's you've got Pepper Fire, which is very good. I like Bolton's. Bolton's is really close to where I live. Bolton's is the closest one, and I'm there a lot. But Prince's is the move. If you come to Nashville and you want hot chicken, Prince's is your first best choice.
You heard it here, folks. A Nebraska specific question.
Yeah.
Connor Oberst or Matthew Sweet?
Connor.
Were you ever much of a Matthew Sweet head?
Sure.
He was not the scene I grew up in at all. And so like much later in life, I was introduced to him.
It was later, but Connor was very foundational for me as a young, skinny indie kid. Sure. It was very, and I was just the right age at the right time. And I remember I was very much right because I remember seeing him seeing Connor. We don't know each other, but I would see him like at parties, and people would like talking like he's getting kind of big, and then Bright Eyes became a whole thing, and Bright Eyes remains very important to me as I think they're great. So Connor, forever, Bright Eyes to the grave.
Better ex-evangelical CCM artists, which we alluded to earlier, Derek Webb or Kevin Max?
Ooh, you're making me pick between
two guys who mean a lot
to me here. I'm going to say I think Derek has had a more I think that he has articulated it in ways that have been more closely aligned with my own personal journey than Kevin's has. So I feel like a little more personal resonance with some of his sort of late works, and with some of his recent kind of dovetailing, not back to evangelicalism, but maybe back to some form of spiritual belief.
Yeah, I think that he's, especially a lot of the stuff that he's done around grief. I've appreciated that quite a bit, and obviously, it's hard to compare the Derek Webb journey and the Kevin Max journey. I mean, nobody's journey is the same, but like, I think the one that Derek has been on for many years, as I feel like as Kevin is kind of now only recently identifying with that term, but maybe still associating it more with the whole, maybe the larger scene, and maybe not necessarily, I don't know if he considers himself like, you know,
I don't know
how he would identify, but I'm still very interested to see where that goes.
You're looking for those bleeps and bloops.
Yes.
Kevin's the way to go.
I'm loving the stuff that he's done in recent years. Definitely very into it. Lots of electronic-y, bleepy bloopy stuff that I'm super into. Okay. I have this is my last question. So this was sometime this must have been like a year ago, maybe, John.
Yeah, sounds right.
I don't remember exactly. So I've been doing a variety of quizzes for John on the pod, and I did a quiz about obscure Marvel characters, and so 3 of them were real and 2 of them I made up. Okay. So I want to tell you my 2 made up Marvel characters, and I want you to tell me which one sounds, more interesting to you, or one.
So these are both fake. These are both your own.
These are both my own.
Okay. I just pick my favorite from the pitch.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Objectively, there's one correct answer.
There is a correct answer.
I mean, just like, I think John and I both agree that we lean, and I think it'll be pretty clear once I read the descriptions.
Okay.
But okay, so my first one is a character I created called Shadow Mind. Mm-hmm. He is a nuclear physicist and inventor named Morris Alabaster, who was first introduced by Marvel in the late 60s as the creator of the superhero Shadow Mind, rival to the criminal syndicate, the Sundown. Partnering with college student Sam Jordan, Alabaster fit Jordan, a human with no innate superhero abilities, with a mind control device that was implanted in his brain. The device allowed him to view the thoughts of his enemies, in addition to being able to temporarily control their speech and see through their eyes. And that came in handy during fights when not all enemies were visible. So that was Shadow Mind.
Okay.
And then Captain Radical. Skateboarding enthusiast Alex Moore was attempting her latest stunt inside what she thought was an abandoned warehouse. While performing a jump off a makeshift ramp, she inadvertently activated a weapon that hit her with a bright blast of light. She felt unfazed after the event until days later, after a horrific fall that should have killed her resulted in no injury. A return to the warehouse revealed the group responsible for the weapon, the villainous enterprise Black Mask. The blast made her bones extremely durable and her skin resistant to most forms of attack. This character was created in partnership with Marvel and the launch of the X Games in 1995. So,
yeah. For me, it's not even close. It's Captain Radical.
Wow.
This girl's a winner. She's
got it.
This got it all. An invincible skateboarding. It's like if Alex Mack was cool. Like, I love this.
Wow.
All right.
Absolutely.
Shots fired, Larissa.
I feel like I picked the wrong answer by I can tell by your eyes.
I mean,
I know how I feel, and I'm not backing down from this. I think I'll take her if you don't want her. I'll ride her. You can have whatever his mastermind or whatever his name was.
Shadow Mind.
Yeah.
I'm seeing here on Twitter, Huckabee commits to first run of Captain Radical series.
100%. I'll draw it too. I don't know. I'm not saying it'll be good, but I mean, here in my head.
I feel like the 1995 artwork vibe and color scheme is like writing itself right now.
Yeah,
like that.
People
90s
love that stuff. It's coming back.
That 90s aesthetic. Yeah, I thought, I don't know, maybe at the time I thought it just felt a little cheesy, but I don't know, maybe it just needs the right writer and someone with a vision to bring it to life.
I can tell that you guys really like Shadow Mind, and that's great. And that's, by all means, write Shadow Mind. That's we could do a crossover event down the road. There's a little team up, a little romance. I don't know. It'll be great.
Maybe here's the thing. Maybe you're right. Maybe we don't need another gritty superhero in the Marvel universe. Maybe we do need someone like Captain Radical, who's got that punk rock aesthetic, and she's unafraid of hitting that vert.
Yeah, man.
They've got they're building a nuclear bomb, right? A nuclear missile, and they've got half of it down, so it's just the bottom half. And she comes. It's a half pipe, right? It's a ready-made half pipe, and there she is. Bam. She like skates down it, and as she's going up and down, she's pulling the pins out of the screws out of it back and forth. They're shooting at her, can't get through the impenetrable skin. The bullets bounce off of her, so no problem there. And then once she's through, she does a little kickflip in the end, lands, and as she skates away, the whole thing just like in a samurai move, it falls apart.
Man, I think he sold me. I think I'm convinced.
I think I might be convinced too.
We got to get the animated version. We can call up Len Olhe or whatever.
Yeah, he'll write it. Yeah.
She can have some theological conversations. It'll be great.
For sure. She can be Christian. Next man, we'll figure that out down the road. That's fine.
Oh man, this is perfect. All right. Well, our next meeting will be planning out the draft of this. Do you have any of the names of the characters there, Andrew, that you quizzed me on?
I did, and one of them was because
Flag Smasher was one of them.
Flag Smasher. This was
okay.
But if you gave this list, Tyler, if you heard this list, would you have been able to confirm that the following are all real Marvel characters?
Let's see. I would have known Flag Smasher.
Screaming Hippie.
No, would not have known that.
So he also goes by Angar the Screamer.
Yes.
David.
Do you know Angar? Yeah.
Yes. So, but the Screaming Hippie was another name that.
Okay.
But some of the I think this was all. You know what? This was also around when we were talking about Brave Saint Saturn, because I said subjected to technology brought to Earth from the moon Titan. And you were unsure if that was related to, if I was trying to like trick you by talking about Brave Saint Saturn. And then there was Dr. Bong.
No Dr. Bong. Deadpool, a Deadpool character.
Yeah. I'm curious. Does Dr. Bong come up much in more recent comics, or
I have not seen Dr. Bong in a minute personally?
What's he up to?
But during the very famous Joe Kelly run in the 90s, Dr. Bong was a regular. Okay. It was a very strange time, even by Deadpool standards. And Dr. Bong,
very fascinating origin story, Dr. Bong.
I think this is why I thought he was fake.
That his hand was severed by a miniature guillotine when performing with the punk band Mildred Horowitz.
It's wonderful.
It's so random and wild. It just sounds like one of those random word generators. And then he lost his hand by a miniature guillotine. It's like it just like
they're just throwing darts at the board and
right.
Yeah. So
was that it?
That was it. Those were good, because obviously
I did not know the Screaming Hippie, but if you had said Angar the Screamer, I would have known that.
Yeah.
And yes, Dr. Bong. I'm familiar with the exploits of Dr. Bong.
All right.
Yes.
Wonderful. I can't wait to learn more about him. Tyler, thank you so much, man. This has been a really fun conversation.
This has been really fun. I appreciate you guys talking. It's fun to chop it up about things that are genuinely interesting to me. So thanks a lot, guys.
You're welcome back anytime. Is there anything you want to plug before you go?
No. I enjoyed this. I'm easy to find on all the socials. I'm the only Tyler Huckabee at Tyler Huckabee everywhere, and relevantmagazine.com is where you can find a lot of my work. Do have a Substack coming out. Probably I hope to get it all ready to go within a week. Not sure when this is launching, but it may be out by the time that this publishes. So if you find me on Twitter at Tyler Huckabee, then you'll be able to subscribe to that there, and you'll be able to read even more of my writing in the event that you would like even more of my thoughts and you would like the opportunity to pay for them instead of just seeing them on Twitter.
Perfect. Look forward to that. Thanks again. We will hopefully talk to you at some point again.
I'll look for truly anytime. This was really fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler.
Tiny dreams, filling up his arms with flowers, bright, forgiving,
well, thanks so much once again to Tyler Huckabee, great guest, hopefully past and future guest of the pod. Great conversation there. Let us know what you think about any of the many things we talked about over at Magnified Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Subscribe to the pod if you haven't yet already, and give us a rating or review, and we'll read your review on the pod. Email us at magnifiedpod@gmail.com.
You can leave us a voicemail at 872-762-4763, 8727-MAG-POD.
You can support us at the Patreon, patreon.com/magnifiedpod. And we want to welcome a couple new Patreon punks this week.
Oh, shit.
Welcome Liam Hughes. Liam is from Australia, coming down under. Getting into the... Oh, Liam. I don't even want to disgrace him with this.
I mean, we famously have amazing Australian accents. Yours is better. You've got the Australian. I've got the Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, the two important poles of any podcast endeavor. Yes, Liam, we want to thank you for spending your hard-earned dollary dues on our podcast. And welcome to
That's not a pod. This is a pod.
Probably.
Oh, we're gonna lose. Liam, don't cancel already.
And
I'm sorry.
unsubscribe.
Damn it.
Welcome also to Lee Clements. Going from sending those Lee mails to hitting up the Patreon.
That's right.
Bass player, Steadicam operator, all around
man.
Good dude, Lee. So thanks so much to both of you for joining us over on the Patreon.
Yeah, he was. Speaking of the Patreon, we got a lot of that content over there on the Patreon. Lee has recently joined, as John indicated, and he was getting into a lot of that Patreon bonus content and some of our hot Primus takes.
Oh yeah,
and talking the 2000s alt metal today on Twitter. You know, so if you wanna get in on some of that the bonus content conversation, like Lee, hit up that Patreon.
That's right. Also, Patreon punks have access to our podcast Discord, which is truly popping off these days. I feel like I say that every week, but such a good community. It's growing more and more each week, and more cool stuff. We started a Patreon punk Spotify playlist where folks are putting in some of their favorite jams. I think it's at like 15 hours right now or something like that. Anyway,
somebody was like, I forget who it was that was like, you guys should do like a bonus episode where you go track by track.
Yeah, I believe Patreon punk Caleb set the whole thing up and then was like, we got to put some rules on this thing. And he may have suggested going through it at a certain point too. Anyway, lots of fun to be had over on the Patreon. Also lots of fun to be had picking up some merch at magnifiedpod.storeenvy.com. Thanks to shadow producer, not guest, permanent team member Jason at Unoriginal Vinyl. And thanks to Heavy Ordnance Studios for our artwork. Well, our time in the penalty box is over for this week. We'll be back out on the ice next week when we'll start covering Goaty Hook. Dun, 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 dun. X-Men. X-Men. Oh, yeah.
Doink, 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 doink. best use of a bell in a theme song ever.
Man, that ending climactic church bell.
All running at each other.
Hell yeah.
Oh God. Fucking lightning just like over everything.
So
like
good.
nothing got like a 9-year-old, 8-year-old Andrew more pumped up.
Hell yeah. Oh man.
Debuted October 31st, 1992, John. Talking that Halloween. Oof. 1992. That 9-year-old wait, no, how old were you? You were
9, yeah.
9-year-old Johnny.
Yep.
Getting that.
Jubilee was running away from those Sentinels, and that was all in, baby.
You're all in.
For more shows like this one, visit rockcandyrecordings.com.